open their way to a Friday night first-round date with Illinois. The intensity.
You'll know when.
Okay.
3.
Just incredible.
That's what it sounded like last night as the Xavier Musketeers advanced to the first round of the NCAA tournament alongside T-Bone and Alex. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. It's one of our favorite days of the year. It is officially the beginning of the NCAA tournament. We are broadcasting live today at Helen Fitzgerald's. Come on out, say hello to us, get yourself a drink, watch all the games. We got, I think, 150 different TVs on, so they'll have all the games ready to go for you out here at Helen Fitzgerald's. T-Bone, we have it locked in. We know who your squad is going to be facing this year in the first round of the NCAA tournament. You've got the Xavier Musketeers. How are you feeling after seeing that performance last night? Texas, Xavier, both look great. And then Xavier comes out on top, and, of course, they hit a bunch of threes as well.
Yeah, look, I found myself last night going into that game saying, you know what, I want Texas to win. And then as I started to watch that game, I went, boy, I don't want either team to win. Because both those teams did not belong in the first four. Their resume put them there. They didn't belong in the first four. Both those teams played excellent basketball last night, and I'm officially worried about my Fighting Illini because that Xavier squad looked awesome. I mean, they have balance. They were attacking the paint. They were doing a good job defensively. They were able to lock down Texas for just a certain amount of stretches. They weren't able to lock them down for the entire game, but their defense did enough in the second half to allow them to come back in that basketball game. So, yeah, call me officially worried about the Fighting Illini. They have officially become on upset watch in my eyes. But, guys, I'm not going to worry about the Illini today, all right?
Why is that,
they're tomorrow,
yeah.
right? You got to pick a team you're going to root for today to start things off.
Well, it's got to be
I got to tell you,
Tigers.
No, look, I'm wearing my favorite team stuff today.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. The Drake Bulldogs, baby. They're in action. My favorite Missouri Valley Conference team. Got some gear on Sunday. Just so happened they ended up running into Missouri in the first round of the tournament. So I got my Drake Bulldogs gear on. Here come the Bulldogs, baby. They're taking down the Tigers tonight.
Not a bulldog, man. You just made a weird wolf sound.
T-Bone's been wearing his jacket all morning. It's cold outside, so I understood
It's a little chilly outside.
When did you purchase that?
Sunday night.
And he was worried it wasn't going to be
Yeah, I
here.
really was.
My wife was on
I
standby
paid-
with her cricket ready to go.
I paid extra for one-day shipping. Yeah.
That's how much we despise you, man.
I've got two things. One, T-Bone's the best kind of friend you can have because you always need somebody like this in your life to keep you balanced. You need them to keep you on your toes at all times. He's also the worst.
Yeah.
There is nobody that is quicker to have that jab right into the side of your abdomen when you've got something that he knows is going to hurt you. Now, this doesn't hurt me because I know Missouri's going to win by 10 to 12 today. So this one doesn't hurt me. But, when the Chiefs were losing against the Bengals in the playoffs, T-Bone was right there to make sure I saw it and felt it every
right over at
moment
that
as
table.
we were here.
I have a picture of it.
I'm leaving, by the way. I can't be here at 6 o'clock when Missouri tips off. It's bad juju for me. I love being at Helen Fitzgerald's. I don't want to have to leave by 6:30. I have to leave by 6:30 because I can't be here for a Missouri game. When my team is playing, it's just bad juju. But T-Bone is the worst kind of person. He's a bad guy. And I want everybody that is listening and watching over on YouTube right now, youtube.com/101ESPNSTL, to understand the kind of human being that Tanner Hendrickson is. And you guys all probably have somebody in your life just like him.
I'm actually really glad he's not wearing a Vancouver Canucks shirt because I would have to get into a fist fight. So, T-Bone, I'm glad it's just the Georgia Bulldogs today.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man, the Drake, they're doing it. I believe.
Can you name a Drake player?
No.
A Drake player. Just
No.
one.
No.
Just one.
I can't.
You know what
Can
the
you
wild
name the
I know-
state that Drake
Oh,
plays
that one I know. They're in
basketball
Iowa.
Okay.
You know what
The
the
only
wild
reason
part
I know
is?
that, by the way, is because
He dropped like $100
Yeah.
on that. He's never going to wear it again after today.
oh, if they win, though, baby, I'm bringing it back for bad memories for BK. Oh, so worth it.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. I'm feeling good. I genuinely think that people – I saw this earlier, T-Bone. If you look at, BetMGM right now, one of their guys that they have for socials, he puts out where all the money's going, where all the tickets are going, where the betting public is placing their money going into this tournament, right? the #1 most bet game, not for money, but for tickets. So the public is all in on one team today. One team and one team alone. Do you know who that team is, Tanner Hendrickson?
Drake
I
Bulldogs.
think it's my Drake Bulldogs.
The Drake Bulldogs have the most tickets of any team in college basketball heading into today's action. They're the most bet March Madness side in terms of number of tickets at ESPN Bet. They are also one of the most bet sides at BetMGM heading into today as well. The public doesn't win, dude. This
Today
is not
they
the
do.
side that you want to be on. You want to be with the sharps, not the public. You're on the public side. I'm on the sharp side with Mizzou.
Here's where the one concern is for me as a Mizzou fan.
BK said they're winning by 10.
Yes, that and that the BKO is undefeated. Drake's got a really good head coach.
They do.
Where
He's
a
very
lot
good
of
head
Power
coach.
5 conferences are like seeking him out after this season.
I think he's going to be the next Iowa head coach.
I think he's going to be the next whatever coach because he's going to take down Mizzou in the first round.
Oh.
Yeah.
If I'm going to go
Yeah.
coach advantage, look, I love me some Dennis Gates. This has been a sensational season. I really don't like going up against a coach that has got all of the good juju going his direction right now. It concerns me, Brandon. It concerns me.
All I'm going to say, Ben McCollum wouldn't lose to Princeton in the second round, right? He wouldn't lose
Correct,
to
'cause
Princeton.
he's
Hey,
never
that was
made the
2
tournament.
years
no,
ago.
No,
It
this
was
is his
2
year.
years ago, man.
What round was that he lost?
Who?
You said Dennis Gates lost in what round?
Round 2.
Yeah, we're
I also know he
So
went
it was
0 and
not
18
round
in
of 64.
SEC.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
at Fred
18.
Underwood
Just
typically.
making sure we're on the same page here. Blues also in action this evening. We'll talk that over with Joey Vitale here in just a moment. He's going to join us at 11:15. Drew King, basketball writer for Power Mizzou, is going to join us at 11:30 to break things down for Mizzou heading into this game against Drake, what he sees happening in this one. Alex, biggest game of the year is tonight for the St. Louis Blues. Canucks playoff odds as of today, according to Mike Kelly of NHL Network, 28%. If they win tonight, that goes up to 42%. If they lose tonight, this is in regulation, drops all the way down to 17%. Again, according to Mike Kelly of NHL Network, Blues playoff odds as of right now, 43%. If they win tonight in regulation, goes all the way up to 54%, a greater than 50% chance of them getting in. If they lose tonight in regulation, drops to 28%, a 25% change in outcomes, change in odds of getting into the playoffs based on what happens in this game between these two teams right here in good old St. Louis this evening. What are you expecting in this one, Alex?
This is going to be a playoff game tonight. This is going to be a playoff feel. It's going to be tight. I think you're going to see back and forth. Mike Kelly also in that tweet put together the season series between these two teams. Offensive zone possession, slot shots, rush chances, all in favor of the Blues. The difference is goals and rebound chances. Vancouver's got more of them, and they've got 2 more goals, and it's because of the prior success. But this is the part for me where I feel like St. Louis is going to be victorious. Vancouver hasn't seen this version of the Blues. The last time they
Exactly.
played was on January 27th. Now, they've got the best of both goaltenders in Joel Hofer and Jordan Binnington. They also had JT Miller at that time, and JT Miller was their top dog. Vancouver's dealing with some injuries. They also are dealing with not having Thatcher Demko. Kevin Lankinen is pretty good against the Blues. To me, this is going to come down to special teams play because I think 5-on-5 is going to be almost identical. I think goaltenders are going to be locked in. It's going to be who makes the mistake on the power play or the penalty kill, who can remain perfect. I think this one, though, is going to be very tight, and I give the Blues the slight edge.
You can have
obviously.
other months that are better in your opinion. I will put March right up there with any when it comes to the sports calendar month. And right now, we're in the heat of it, man. We've got Mizzou in action later on this evening. The NCAA tournament begins in earnest, like right now. It's about to start right here at Helen Fitzgerald's. We're going to be broadcasting live here until 2 o'clock. Fastlane takes over at 2. They'll be broadcasting until 6. Come on out, say hello. It's all refreshed by Bud Light with Alex and T-Bone. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/101 ESPN STL. In 15 minutes, we're going to preview Mizzou versus Drake with Drew King of Power Mizzou. But coming up next, Joey Vitale is going to join the show. He's going to give us his preview of tonight's game between the Blues and the Canucks here on BK and Ferrario.
You can now listen to
Your life.
It's the best time of the year here on BK and Ferrario. We got the NCAA tournament up. Creighton versus Louisville is your first game of the day. Some March Madness trivia for you. Creighton, the first team in the tournament to score. They're up 2-0 about 2 minutes in. Low-scoring affair thus far, but
Is that really trivia?
I was going to say, that was kind of boring trivia.
that's terrible
you
trivia.
know.
It is what it is. We'll see
it
if
was a
Joey Vitale
50-50.
thought it was interesting. He is our
50-50
Blues
shot.
analyst for 101 ESPN and, of course, FanDuel Sports Midwest. He joins us each and every week here on BK and Ferrario via the Callier and Thompson hotline. Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. Heading into the biggest game of the season tonight. How you doing today?
Joey! Can you tell me what really a Canuck is?
Hey, what's going on? Yeah, it's the most dreaded time of the year for me, as I have to hear about everyone's NCAA bracket. This is a tough one. You know, nothing screams "get out of my face! You're the most annoying human I ever met." Like,
Okay,
did you see what happened to Gonzaga? Oh, dude. Let me tell you. Let me show you my bracket here. So it screwed this up because Gonzaga lost. I'm like, I don't care. Get out of my face before I punch you.
Joe, what's worse? Somebody asking you about the bracket or asking you when you wear your green jacket if you play or if you won the Masters?
Oh my God! Tell me the green jacket comment.
He's got a green
100
jacket
times.
and he wears it, and people are like, "Hey, Joe, you played in the Masters?"
Oh, God.
Hey, Masters Sunday, Joe. I'm like, no, I hate golf. Listen, that one drives me crazy. You know, and listen, I don't mind the brackets. I don't mind the tournament. I just don't care about your personal bracket. I care about your personal bracket like I care about your personal hygiene. Unless you're my wife, I don't give a darn. I don't care.
I care if it starts to affect me. If your personal hygiene starts, like if T-Bone or Alex, who I have to work with every day, Joe, started showing up and they hadn't showered in 3 weeks, suddenly I would have an issue.
Oh, my gosh. I mean, I know it's coming. And Alex probably going to really stir the pot tonight. Oh, just see what happened to Clemson. Oh, man. I'm like, get out of my face.
Joe,
Don't do it.
Joe, we need to set this up for Curbs later tonight, so we'll stage it to where I'll bring a bracket in and I'll say it, and then I just need you to go off on me and then rip the bracket out of my hand and tear it up in front of Curbs, and we'll see what he does.
I might do that. You know, and this isn't just me, guys. Like, I'm watching conversations happen about brackets. Like, let's say you two are having a conversation, and Alex opens it up. Oh, BK, did you see Purdue lose? And I immediately see BK's response. It's the same response we give other humans when they tell us about, like, our allergies. Like, I'll tell you more about my allergy to hay. People are like, who has ever said, tell me more about your allergies? I don't care.
I view it as a fantasy football team, right? Like, I care about my fantasy football team. You care about your fantasy football team, but we don't care about each other's fantasy football team, so we don't need to discuss them at length.
Yes. Just say I have a bracket. It sucks. Let's move on.
There you go. All right, Joe, let's move on. Let's get into this Blues game that is going to be taking place tonight. It's one of the biggest games in all of hockey that has been played so far this year. NHL Network put out a tweet just a little bit ago on the playoff odds. You can take them or leave them in terms of the actual odds, but they say there's a 25% swing, basically, in which of these teams is potentially going to make the playoffs based on who wins tonight if it takes place in regulation. For you, as you're going into a game like this, Joe, you've got the former player's mentality. What is a game like this to play in? What does it feel like?
Well, listen, players are going to say, oh, it's just another game. It's just another show up to work and do your thing. It's not, right? They're saying that. They are going to do those things, but I'm telling you right now, there is an extra level that they are going to find, and they're going to find it pretty quickly. I mean, this is as close to a playoff game, guys, that the Blues and the Vancouver Canucks have seen all year. You know, it's possible that we may see a few more of these down the stretch. You know, I don't know why, but that Utah game, that final home game for the Blues, that's got playoff implications written all over it for me as well. I don't think necessarily between Utah and St. Louis, but I do think maybe between Utah, St. Louis, and Van, or St. Louis or Calgary. So I don't think this is the end of it. I think that this is certainly one of at least 3 or 4 playoff style of games that we're going to see. I expect to see high intensity, a ton of hitting, a ton of emotion, right? The good news for St. Louis is that they have a lot of veterans and they have a lot of champions on their team. Now, Vancouver does not, right? I think from a champion and a veteran standpoint, the Blues can favor now the Vancouver Canucks. Why is that important? Because in any playoff series, in any playoff game, you are going to have to manage your emotions. It's the ups and it's the downs. And the good thing for St. Louis, BK, as we've seen, throughout the last especially few weeks, it doesn't really matter what happens to this team. Fly day of game, who cares, right? Your best player goes down, Colton Parayko, probably done for the season, who cares? You just keep moving forward to the point where Tim Montgomery's even said, as recently as a couple of days ago, we're actually looking for adversity because we find that it's driving us. So that is the kicker for me, where I think St. Louis is going to be just fine here this evening because whatever happens in the game, they just have this fight-back mentality on top of a rested Jordan Binnington who's been doggone good at home.
And, Joe, just you describing both of those styles and what to expect in this one tonight. For me, I think the advantage is going to come on special teams, but looking at the last two games, there were a lot of goals scored in the crease for the Vancouver Canucks, and the difference is this St. Louis team has found a way to eliminate those high-danger scoring chances for the opposition since they played against each other back in January.
Yeah, I mean, they have a style going right now where they're not leaving the front of the net. They're aggressive in the D zone, but they're not overly aggressive where they're vacating valuable ice. You know, I'm seeing this from up top over and over and over. You know, the days of two defenders going to the puck carrier in the corner where then they'd slip it to the back door, those days are over. You know, this is a disciplined St. Louis team where the D zone with the veteran players, it's completely turned around. And I think for the veteran players, this style actually suits them pretty well because you don't have to be overly aggressive. I think this is one of many examples of how Jim Montgomery has used older veteran players to their advantage. You know, you have this group, all these guys with over 1,000 games, the most experience of any defensive core in the National Hockey League. Well, it'd be foolish to play a run-and-gun aggressive D-zone where you're running like crazy to seal things off and outman and overload and, you know, outnumber 3-on-2 in the far corner, because then you're going to exhaust your horses. I think, Jim, this is why he's so good, is he's like, before we come up with a procedure, before we come up with any sort of identity of let's look at the logistics of how we want to play, let's look at our horses first. And this is what we are. This is how we have been built under Doug Armstrong, and this is what it's available. So let's take that and use it to our advantage where we don't have to be running all over the place. Let's allow our older guys to just stay put, defend hard, get up sticks, and be really solid in front of the blue paint. So I think that that's something that really stands out, especially over these last few games without Colton Parayko. This defensive core has stepped up in a big way. It's a lot on them individually. It's a lot on the system they're playing down low. But just having a steady guy in front of the net constantly where no one is vacating that area, they've been a tough team to play against. I mean, it's been really fun to watch.
Joe, final question that I've got for you. We're talking to Joey Vitale here on 101 ESPN. He'll be on the call tonight for Blues versus the Canucks. You'll be able to hear that right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. You mentioned doing this without Colton Parayko. They have done it, and they've looked really good, honestly, and it's been a bit of a surprise to me, and I think many, that they've been able to hold up as well as they have. That being said, I do think it is at least worth acknowledging the competition that they've done this against. Anaheim, Pittsburgh, Minnesota at not totally full strength. Anaheim again, Nashville. They did have the game against LA. They looked mostly pretty good in that one. How do you think this defense will hold up against a team like Vancouver, which is certainly a bit of a step up in competition offensively compared to what they have seen previously?
You know, it's a fair question, BK, and, you know, it goes really to the strength of schedule, where I think the Blues, by analytics standpoint, have probably the best chance as far as the weakest schedule they're facing out of the teams that are in this kind of wild card race. You know, it's kind of twofold. Sometimes it can play tricks with you, where these teams that are down under, if you will, are out of it. They get these free agent signings, they get some new players, and they just play kind of a more open, free style, which can be sometimes really hard to defend against. But I think at the end of the day, you're better off playing those teams than strong teams. This is going to be a great test for them. And it's going to be a test in the sense I really think it's going to challenge them mentally more than physically. And what I mean by that is, to your point, and I thought about this, you know, this morning when I was looking over some notes over the game, you know, Nashville, you know, a depleted Minnesota without two of their top scorers. You know, the Ducks multiple times. The Penguins were atrocious in that game. I mean, it was almost unwatchable. So the reality is you play these bad teams. Now you get away with a lot of mistakes against these bad teams. Tonight's one of those things where you're just coming off a bunch of games against, for the most part, you've not been playing great teams. Now, you've gotten away with those mistakes. If you play the same way and you think you're going to get away with those mistakes tonight, that's where you can be pulling pucks out of the back of your net. So that's what I mean mentally. You have to be super razor sharp on the details of the game and not allowing, bad plays to happen. A perfect example, Tyler Tucker against the Nashville Predators. I think it was the first period, he tries to make a move at the blue line. He gets poked away. It ends up becoming a 2-on-1. Now, Nashville was on their fourth line. Not great. They end up getting caught. Braden Shen makes a great back check. Not on net. You do that to Brock Besser tonight. You could be pulling pucks constantly out of the back of your net. So that's where I mean by the decisions at the blue lines, the decisions about when to pinch, making sure you have support before you pinch. All those details of the game are going to have to be heightened. They're going to be raised, which brings more pressure to the game, which at the end of the day, of course, guys, makes everything much more exciting.
He's Joey Vitale. You'll hear him on the call tonight right here on 101 ESPN. Blues versus the Canucks starting at 5:30 with pregame coverage for Alex Ferrario. Puck drop tonight at 6:30. The only place that you'll be able to hear the local coverage of that game is right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Joe, appreciate the time as always, man. Enjoy the game out there tonight. We'll talk with you again next week.
Good luck with those brackets.
Thank you, boys. Yeah, please keep your brackets to yourself, everybody. Thank you.
Appreciate it. That's Joey Vitale joining us here on 101 ESPN, as he does each and every Thursday on BK and Ferrario. Big Blues game tonight. Looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun, and I'm going to just say it right now, 3-2 final score, St. Louis.
I'm not going to say anything. I
No,
will
yeah, you
avoid
keep
a
your
BKO
mouth shut.
for tonight, and
Yeah.
I will do that for you, the listening audience. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us today as we're broadcasting live out here at Helen Fitzgerald's. Come on out, say hello. Already getting pretty packed out here. We've got one game on. It's Louisville versus Creighton. I have Louisville in this one. I know Joey was curious which
Joey's got
side
Louisville.
we all picked. Louisville down 16-15 early going here. Under 12 timeout with Creighton up 16-15. Again, 12 minutes to go in that one in the first half. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to some of your questions. 314-399-9646 is the Your Comfort Service text line to get those in. YouTube chat is off and running at youtube.com/101ESPNSTL. But coming up next, we got some questions for Drew King, basketball writer for Power Mizzou. He's going to help us preview this matchup between Mizzou and T-Bone's Drake Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Drew King joins us next here on 101 ESPN.
See Patrick over
A little bit of news for you guys when it comes to the NCAA tournament. It looks like Cooper Flagg is going to suit up for tomorrow's Duke first-round game. Just a heads up, Jordan, it sounds like we no longer have the echo. Had the echo for a second. We're good to go. Cooper Flagg expected to suit up for Duke's first-round game. That is big news for the NCAA tournament. We now go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by our friend, Power Mizzou's basketball writer covering the Missouri Tigers. He's Drew King. He's going to help us preview Missouri's first-round matchup, which is taking place later on this evening in Wichita. Drew, first of all, been a longtime reader of your work over at PowerMizzou.com. First time to have you on the show. Appreciate you hopping on today, man. How's it feel covering the Tigers in this year's tournament?
We got to Wichita a couple of days ago. The weather's been crazy, but the basketball's been really good, so really looking forward to it.
All right, Drew, let's get into this thing. You wrote about this over at Power Mizzou, and it's the biggest topic of conversation when it comes to Mizzou versus Drake. It's the matchup of styles, right? Drake wants to play slow. Mizzou wants to get up and play with tempo. When you talked with the team yesterday, how did they feel like they were going to be able to manage that tempo change that Drake wants to play with?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is they've got to be disruptive defensively. Both teams are top 10 in the country in steal rate, so I think that this is a game where like the turnover margin is going to be one of the most important factors in the game. And so if Mizzou's able to create some of those takeaways and push in transition, this shouldn't be too much of an issue, I don't think. But Drake obviously has played a lot of teams this season, and they've been really good about keeping it to right around 60 possessions every single time out. So I don't know that Drake's necessarily seen a team that's as big or as athletic as Mizzou is, but I think that's definitely like the most interesting aspect of this game is just who can dictate the pace.
Drew, about a month ago, it felt like we were talking about this Mizzou team potentially going on a deep run in the tournament for how great they have played. And then, of course, since then, they lost 6 of their 7 games. What changed, in your opinion, for the Tigers?
Yeah, so I think for one, Caleb Grill's shot fell off a little bit. Gabe has a stat about how he's only made, close to 25% from 3 in his last 10 games. And then on top of that, the defensive rebounding has kind of fallen off a cliff. They were number 1 in the SEC 7 games into the year, and they finished 11th. So that's really not ideal. But I think that last week in the SEC tournament, they got back to some of those things. Obviously, Caleb Grill hasn't found his rhythm again, but you did see Tamar Bates step up. You saw Tony Perkins be more aggressive. And they did a much better job on the boards and hanging in there, especially against Florida. So I do think we saw them turning a little bit of a corner, and maybe being back home in Wichita is what Caleb Grill needs to get back on track.
I also think it's worth noting for our audience. So, Drew, we have something on our show called the BKO. My nickname, I go by BK on this show, and anytime that I jump in on something, it tends to go poorly. I was all in on Mizzou after that Alabama game, and you know what's happened since you cover the team day to day. You also have an issue. When you cover this team on the road, they lose. They never find ways to win when you're in attendance on the road. So I'm curious, how are we dictating? Is this a true road game for Mizzou since you're on the road with them? Was that changed last week since they did win and you were in Nashville with them? How are we evaluating if this is a road game or not since you're in attendance covering this thing?
Yeah, so it's good news and bad news, right? We're calling it the Drew King factor, and it's basically like, what is your score differential when you are away from home and I'm in the building? So road or neutral games, they both apply here. And before last week, Mizzou was 0-7 in the DKF, the Drew King factor. Now, they did finally get into the win column against Mississippi State. I was there for that one, so I don't think it's all on me. But here's the thing, guys. Like, it works both ways. So all of those home games that Mizzou won this year is because I was in the building and the road team lost. So, neutral site game, obviously, Drake I haven't been in the building for any of those games. We'll see how they fare in the DKF, but it's definitely a weird phenomenon going on.
Drew, there's one thing you got to know about BK. He loves to blame other people when he's actually the problem, so it doesn't surprise me.
Sounds like Drew King has the same issue.
It doesn't surprise me he threw you under the bus, Drew, because he's trying to make people believe that he's actually not a curse other people are.
Dude, his went way beyond mine. His happened when they were at Texas.
No, he defended how
point.
some of them went in his favor when he was in attendance. They have never gone in your favor with the BKO.
That's a fair point. Hadn't thought about it that way.
Drew's
right.
done with you.
Drew, let's expand this conversation a little bit. I feel like we got smarter about what we can expect from Mizzou versus Drake later on this evening. You've seen all these teams in the SEC. My understanding, based on hearing you on the podcast with Gabe DeArmond, you watch a lot of basketball. So when you look at the SEC this year and how you expect them to fare in this year's tournament, do you think this conference is legitimately as good as people are hyping it up to be, or do you think there's going to be a little bit of a backlash and maybe teams struggle more than expected in the first round? How are you viewing this?
No, I really do think the SEC this year was like one of the best conferences of all time in college basketball. Like you saw what they did in the SEC ACC Challenge. You saw like Oklahoma go 14-0, and all of their losses came in SEC play. So I do think, like, I'm expecting a lot of success out of the teams this year. I kind of put the line at 8.5 for teams to make it out of the first round. Obviously, Texas eliminated itself already, but I think that over half the conference can find themselves in the round of 32, and I'm not sure that there are many other leagues out there or any other leagues out there that have been able to do that before.
Drew, final one from me. Hypothetical here. Missouri wins today. What went right for them to beat Drake?
To me, it has to be that Mark Mitchell had a dominant game. Drake plays this pack line defense where they kind of try to keep four guys with a foot in the paint at all times, but their interior defense isn't all that good anyway, right? They kind of do that to make up for their lack of size because their biggest player is 6'8". Well, Mark Mitchell is taller than everybody on the team. He's been dominant in the SEC, like shooting 75% at the rim over his last 10 games, and that's against bigger and stronger athletes in the SEC. So I think that he's going to have a field day against Drake today.
All right, Drew, we'll get you out of here on this. You covered Texas for a period of time. You were down there, or you went to Texas, excuse me.
Yeah.
Our guy T-Bone is an Illinois fan. Brad Underwood, I would have to imagine, is somebody that Texas would be interested in to be their next head coach. They fired their coach last night after they were booted from this year's tournament. Who do you think they should go out there and get? Do you think Brad Underwood should be high on that list?
Yeah, I do. I would think that Brad Underwood is high on the list. I was kind of thinking that Will Wade wouldn't have been a bad option. Obviously, he's kind of off the table now. I know the last time when they were looking for Shaka Smart's replacement, they were considering Chris Beard and Royal Ivey, who is an alum and an assistant coach in the NBA right now. So I think that he might be a candidate again this time around. But, yeah, I don't know that there's anyone you can really take off the table who's already in, like, a coaching position right now. Like, they went out and got Chris Beard, even though he was already established at Texas Tech. So, yeah, I'm curious to see how that goes. But I wouldn't take Brad Underwood off the table.
Hey, we appreciate the time, Drew. Really great work over at PowerMizzou.com so far this year. Looking forward to reading all of the coverage as things go along here in the NCAA tournament. Enjoy yourself out there in Wichita. Hopefully we'll talk again soon, man.
Definitely will. Thanks.
You got
Thanks,
it. That's Drew King, basketball writer for PowerMizzou.com. Check out their great work over there. Be sure to subscribe if you're a Mizzou fan and you aren't already. You're missing out on a ton of great content. Let's stick on that for just a second, T-Bone. We talked a lot of Mizzou there. You're a Illini. I would not bet on them losing their coach this offseason. I don't think Underwood will take that job. However, he coached at Stephen F. Austin. I don't know if you're familiar with where that is location-wise, but it is indeed in the state of Texas. Texas is a hell of a job, man. They've got a ton of money to offer. I would have to imagine their NIL fund is pretty damn good. The SEC appears to be the best conference in the land right now when it comes to college basketball. Is it something that, like, scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about that possibility?
3.
Okay.
I'm not worried about it. I think Illinois is a great job for college basketball, you know.
I agree.
And though I tend to agree what you said about the SEC is, hey, it's a great conference for basketball. It's a great conference this year, and it has been on the up and up. But we've seen how this goes in college basketball, man. I don't think this is going to be like football where it will be SEC probably till the end of time. College basketball, these conferences fluctuate a lot. Big Ten used to be that. ACC used to be that when I was growing up. So I don't think he will look at the Texas job. I think he'll answer the call. I mean, you have to answer the call. I think he's going to realize, hey, I'm in a pretty good spot at Illinois. I'm not under pressure to where if I lose even in this first round to Xavier coming up tomorrow, where he will be on the hot seat. Texas, that's quite the opposite, as we just saw.
That's what I was going to say, is I think that the stability at Illinois has to be a factor in favor of him, man. Texas cycles through coaches like crazy. Look at what Shaka Smart did. Shaka Smart is a damn good basketball coach. Didn't work at Texas. So there's no guarantee that if Brad Underwood ended up leaving Illinois and going to Texas, that it would work for him. I would stick with where I'm at. I think that's the right call. I don't think he ends up leaving, but I do think you're probably going to hear his name as part of the rumor mill for this job down at Texas now that it is indeed open. All right, he's Tanner Hendrickson. That is Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If you missed any of our conversations with Joey Vitale or Drew King, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Questions and answers coming up next.
You're clear.
Know that my bracket is already busted. Creighton's up 40-25. They've gone on a big run against Louisville. Louisville is the 8 seed in that one, slight favorite in this game. Creighton, though, absolutely raining down threes on Louisville. It is 40-25. 4 minutes to go in the first half in that one. So not a great start for us here on the show with the first game. However, High Point looking pretty good thus far. Down 13-11, but they've acquitted themselves well. Watching this game, their offense looks pretty good. It's 13-11. 13 minutes to go in the first half in that one. Those are the 2 games currently in action. Next one to tip is Wisconsin versus Montana.
Give me a great game.
That game starts coming up at 12:30. It is the game that Alex is most looking forward to today.
Just in that
from
region.
the East region.
Just in that region.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. From the 636, guys, I know they're an 8 seed, but why isn't UConn getting any attention for a potential three-peat this year? I think it's pretty simple. They're the 8 seed. Most people don't think that they're even going to get past their second-round matchup, which is potentially going to be against a 1.
Yeah, and that's where I have them losing. I think they could beat Oklahoma, and I'm not really bought in on Oklahoma, but you're not going past Florida. Yep. Florida, to me, is the dominant force right now in that bracket, and really that side of the bracket. So, yeah, UConn stops in the second round.
Yeah, and the thing for them is, like, they're still a solid offensive team. They just don't play good enough defense, and you're going to have to play defense against that Florida side. I think that's what it is. I mean, they got seeded as an 8, and that means you're running into the number 1 seed in the first round, and they're probably, odds are, not going to get upset to where you don't have to play them in round 2.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 314. Guys, what's your biggest upset pick for today?
This High Point game, actually.
I've got VCU over BYU. That's my big upset pick. I also had High Point. I went back and forth on that one. I don't know how much I actually believe it, but the one that I really believe is going to happen is VCU over BYU. It's only 2.5-point spread, but seed-wise, it's a pretty big upset, 11 over a 6.
Yeah, that's my biggest one because tomorrow is my Lipscomb over Iowa State.
I've also got Yale over Texas A&M. That's a little bigger, 4 versus a 13 and a 7.5-point line. So I've got Yale tonight as well.
Yeah, my 2 biggest ones, UC San Diego over Michigan. They've got a great offense. I think they can win a round. I don't think they go further than that. And then, of course, my Drake Bulldogs taking down the Missouri Tigers is my second one. I got them going against Missouri and winning in the first round, baby. Good start for underdogs and teams in blue so far this tournament.
Yeah, but they're Blue Jays, man. It's a different animal.
Whatever. They're the blue color. Looks like my sweatshirt.
We should have always known that the Blue Jay was better than the Cardinal.
True.
You know? Should have always known that.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers from the 618. Guys, who is the team that is seeded high that you just don't believe in this year's tournament? Well, that's a good question. High seed that you just don't believe in the tournament.
What are we considering a high
Top 4,
seed?
I feel like it's probably what you would consider to be like a legitimately high seed.
I was going to say, because judging off of my bracket, I believe in a lot of these top 2 seeds.
I would say Arizona is probably the one that immediately jumps out. Kentucky is another one that I just don't know how much I'm buying what they are as currently constructed. If they were fully healthy, they could be a Final Four team. But as currently constructed, without Butler potentially in the lineup, I would have them as another one that's on this list.
Kentucky's mine because I have them losing to Xavier in the second round.
Yeah, I like the Arizona one. Another team in their region that I said this when we broke down this region when we were talking about the East. Mine's Alabama, man. They are such a volatile team because they can put up points with anybody. They just don't get enough stops, man. And if you don't get stops, I'm not going to trust you in March. I fear that they could be a team, maybe not lose in round 1, but we could be shocked in round 2 that they could lose to a St. Mary's or a Vanderbilt.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 636. Guys, who do you think is the most underrated or underappreciated Blues player on the team right now? Alex, you mentioned somebody yesterday that I think fits into this category, and it's Cam Fowler.
Yeah. I forgot about him because, honestly, the one that came to mind for me is Pavel Buchnevich. Mostly because he doesn't put the goals up that I think people expect him to put up, but you look at it, he's right there and with Robert Thomas in points and plus-minus, he's the best on the team since the break. But Fowler has to be because from where the team was prior to that trade, we were still talking about this defense not being very good and talking about getting rid of Falk and Leddy and trying to move on from those contracts. And since the acquisition of Cam Fowler, I hear nobody talk about Justin Falk or Nick Leddy because they're used in their roles that they're suited for. Yep. They're not used for a Cam Fowler spot. And, man, I remember everybody when Cam Fowler was acquired, specifically our boy Dom, saying, he's old, he's washed up, it's not going to work. He has been their best offensive weapon on the defensive side, right up there with Colton Parayko. And if you look at how they've been utilizing him, power play, penalty kill, and 5-on-5, he's been great for him. So, yeah, I think he and Booch would be tied for first.
Yeah, I like the one on Fowler. I don't know if he falls in this category or not since he's technically a rookie, but I would throw Bolduc in here. I feel like Bolduc's kind of underappreciated as a third-line winger that's got 12 goals, 26 points, and by the way, he's age 21. Like, there's still more to come with his game. He's playing at a level that we were not expecting from him, I don't think, coming into this season. So I would say Bolduc, for me, falls into this category.
It's a good one because he's added depth.
And he reminds me so much – we've talked about this before. He reminds me so much of Perron, not by what he's doing production-wise, but he's doing things the right way defensively. He throws the body around a little bit. He's got a pretty good shot when he gets there.
I'll throw one more out there, and it's Oscar Sundqvist. I thought the biggest weakness on this team heading into the final stretch was that third-line center. We said going into the trade deadline, if they ended up being buyers or they believed in the roster that they could actually make a run, upgrade there. Sonny, I don't think he's been excellent, but he's been more than fine. And that line is contributing in meaningful ways. That doesn't happen if he's been some kind of massive liability out there.
Well, and if you're going to give Bolduc the praise, you have to give Sundqvist the praise because Jim Montgomery has said the only reason Bolduc and that line has been playing well is because of Oscar Sundqvist.
All right, he's Alex Ferrario. That is Tanner Hendrickson, and I'm Brandon Kiley. Big Blues game coming up tonight. Blues back in action against the Vancouver Canucks. Which of these teams is built in a more sustainable model? We'll talk about that, how we feel about the Blues building with this pack mentality once again. We'll talk about it next year on 101 ESPN. All right, Blues back in action tonight. One of the biggest games of the year in the NHL. If you just look at how it affects the potential playoff standings with Alex and T-Bone on BK. Alex will be in attendance for this one for the Blues versus the Canucks. And if you want to hear the St. Louis angle on this game, there's one place where you can get it. It's right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Pre-game for that one starts at 5:30. Puck drop at 6:30. Again, on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. All right, Alex, let's talk about this from the two different angles that you can have. The two different teams are built completely differently.
Yeah.
Vancouver is about their stars, right? It's about we've got a legit number one defenseman in Quinn Hughes, and we have the go-to guy in Elias Pettersson. They had JT Miller, star, traded him away. They have Brock Besser, star, teetering on star, 40-goal scorer in his past. He might be walking via free agency going into this offseason. So I thought you brought up something earlier today about the way that the two teams are constructed and whether or not one is more likely to sustain success over the long haul than the other.
Yeah, I see two teams going in opposite directions after this game tonight. If it goes the way I expect it to, and I think the Blues win, you're going to see Vancouver potentially fall out of a window that I thought was opening for the last couple of years. And what's changed? Well, the Stars weren't getting the job done. They had to move on from JT Miller, internal drama between he and Elias Pettersson. Pettersson has been underwhelming this season, and Quinn Hughes has been injured. And why I find this one interesting is you're going to see, at least for the now, what style of hockey wins, meaning pack mentality or star power. Because we all believe and know that Quinn Hughes is a superstar in this game. The same can be said prior to this season. Elias Pettersson was viewed that way. He was a top centerman in the game. The Blues don't have anybody of that ilk. They have a lot of guys that you could consider stars, but I think from the national perspective, you've got a lot of guys that are probably players that aren't talked enough about type of stars. But that's how the Blues have always talked about this. Doug Armstrong has always made it clear we build pack mentality-wise. And we talked about this yesterday, guys. If you look at where they're at now and what next year's supposed to be with the Snuggerudes and the Dvorskys, top to bottom, you have threats on three lines. Vancouver doesn't have that. Vancouver's got Dakota Joshua's a good player, but that's their third-line winger. They've got guys on their fourth line, guys on their third line that aren't viewed as anybody who could make impact. So I find this matchup very interesting because it's two teams that are viewed in different stages of their lives, and Vancouver has had an unsuccessful past couple of years because it was supposed to be Stanley Cup window opening.
I would say last year was successful for them. Because they were so bad before that last year they got back and it was like, oh, here comes Vancouver.
Maybe.
People didn't buy into it at the beginning of the year, and they're like, this is puck luck. They're going to fall back to earth. They were a really good team, but this year was supposed to be the year that they capitalized on it, and it was the opposite.
Which is why
drama all year long, and it was a disaster.
Which is why I do really believe that this could be a window closing for them. They've already moved on from JT Miller. Quinn Hughes has made it pretty clear, hey, if we don't start figuring this ish out, we're going to have to start moving away. No, I wasn't going to say it there.
It's a good thing we've got training next
I mixed
week.
my words up, and Elias Pettersson has been a guy that's still in trade talks right now. Does star power win, or does pack mentality win? And I think a lot of people would lean towards star power, but Vancouver, to me, is a perfect example of how it can go the opposite direction. This team has had Quinn Hughes since he was 19 years old, and I'd argue since he was 21, he's been a star in the league. They haven't gotten past the second round since Quinn Hughes has been on this roster.
I would still say the way that I would, if I was in charge of building a team, I think that ideally I would build around 3 stars, 2 forwards and a defenseman. That would be my ideal way of building a roster. And, I mean, if we're being honest, Vancouver had that. Yeah. They had the 2-star forwards where it was we've got Pettersson and we've got Miller. If you want to include Besser in there, feel free to do so. I wouldn't put him into that same category. I think he's more like a Kyrou Thomas, really, really good. I don't know about superstar, though. And then they've got Quinn Hughes, who's a legit star defenseman. But then from there, you have to build the pack mentality. Mm-hmm. And I think, personally, that is a little easier to do so than to find the stars. The stars are the hardest thing to find in sports, man. Finding true, legitimate difference makers, good luck. We've talked about that for the Cardinals for a decade. They're still waiting for their next legitimate superstar. The Blues, you could, I suppose, have Vladimir Tarasenko in that category as superstar, but if you didn't, who is their last superstar?
Petro.
Brett Hull? That's the last guy, probably?
Last
Petro
forward.
was a star.
Last forward. Keith Tkachuk. I think Keith Tkachuk was viewed as a star in the league.
20 years,
yeah.
right? It's hard to find those guys. So I would always start with the stars and then build from there. I saw the Avalanche do this where they have the stars in place, and at the deadline, boom, bring in our third and fourth line wingers. Boom, bring them in every year. You can find those guys for second, third, fourth round picks. It ain't hard to do so. You got to get it right, but that is something that you can build on the fly during the course of the season. The top line players, it's harder to do so. That being said, if you're talking about sustainability, this is probably less fragile because the stars, if you build that way, 1 year it all clicks. It all comes together and you win the Stanley Cup. If you get the wrong supporting depth the next year, and you're going to have to change them out year to year because of the money. If you get it wrong the next year, dude, it falls off like that. So I think this is a little bit more sustainable. The floor is higher on the way that the Blues are building, but I think it's easier to build the ceiling for a team like Vancouver.
See, and I would actually say I disagree with that because I think when you look at a team that builds pack mentality like the Blues, it just takes one, you have less of a ceiling. You do raise the floor up just a bit because you know you've got stabilization with your lines by what you're doing with everybody. Like the Blues was 3 years ago with the 9-20 goal scorers. But the problem is, and I think you saw this early on with the Blues, and don't you go blaming Bannister, but what you saw early on with the Blues was, okay, well, Booch wasn't that guy. Bolduc wasn't playing at the level that he is now, and you just saw that there was no stabilizing it, right? You have to have everything clicking if you're building pack mentality just to make sure that the floor stays where it's at without falling out. And I think that's what you saw with the Blues, right, was, we don't really have that superstar to lean on, and then we've only got 7 of the 9 guys, really 6 of the 9 guys clicking at that point. And they were not a playoff team. They were a team that we're talking about that should be selling off for everything. Yep. And that's why I look at like building with the superstars. Though yes, the floor sometimes can be lower because you got to go out and replace constantly those pack mentality guys. Those guys help raise that floor. And then when it does click all together, the ceiling is just up and beyond. Like you look at the Oilers from last year that got to the finals. That team was loaded with McDavid and Draisaitl carrying them.
Who are the teams with superstars that fall off like what you're talking about, though?
Fall off of a cliff?
Yeah, who are they?
Well, Vancouver's one of them, but I think that's the drama.
But they're not falling off. They're where the Blues are.
Yeah, but like from where they were supposed to be, they should be fighting for a top 3.
They don't have one of those stars that we're talking about anymore.
Because
it didn't work personality-wise.
Well, they don't have 2 of those 3 superstars because Pettersson has not played like a superstar this year.
That's fair.
Quinn Hughes has been it, and Quinn Hughes has been injured.
The reason I asked, like, the superstars, man, Florida, Toronto, Tampa, Washington, New Jersey, New York Rangers. You could argue the Rangers are maybe that team where it's fallen off to a certain degree.
Right in the hunt, technically.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you wanted to go down the path,
Pittsburgh is probably the team.
You could look at the Rangers. You could look at the Bruins because those are 2 teams that have built with superstars, Pasta, and then the Rangers have Artemi Panarin and Zibanejad. And like in the Western Conference, I don't know. Those teams don't. Really I mean, Nashville. Nashville to me might be a perfect example of it that tried to build around superstars, but those were older superstars. The one flaw to me when you build with superstars is why Vancouver has had their issues this year and why all the drama started. Because when you rely on superstars, if those guys aren't great for 82 games and carrying your team, when your team goes into a cold spell or a dry spell, everyone starts pointing fingers at those guys. Nobody knows how to take over. Nobody knows how to take the ball in that scenario when Pettersson's not playing well. And then you start pointing fingers and saying, well, you're not doing your job. And then everything falls apart. And where the pack mentality feels like it works is what we've seen this season. In January, when Thomas and Buchnevich were not playing well, that was when Kyrou, Shen, and Holloway shined. For the last couple of weeks, when you get a dry spell from Jordan Kyrou, well, Zach Bolduc's picking up 5 goals in 7 games. That, to me, is where the pack mentality can be more positive because they fill the cracks when something falls apart.
Can be. There was also about a month before then where Thomas and Booch weren't playing up to expectations and nothing else was able to make up for that because you didn't have your stars playing like stars. So when your stars are playing like stars, as Booch, Thomas, Holloway, Kyrou
fault.
have been recently. Yeah, that was after he was fired.
Sorry. It wasn't Drew's fault.
When those guys aren't playing up to expectations, I think that's just your best players, no matter how you are constructed, have got to be really good dudes. And if they're not, then it just isn't going to work out. Building a team in the NHL is freaking hard, man.
When you get
really hard.
Pack mentality is the hardest, but when you get it, you're going to stay in that window for a pretty long time.
I think you can. You can.
And I would argue, like, when you mentioned Vancouver, like, when they were going through it, they were struggling, then they would point the fingers at their stars in Pettersson and Miller. I would say if they're not performing then they're not the superstars that you thought they were, right? Like, they may be because they're the point producers, But your superstars, like the Oilers, for example, and I keep using them because they've got the two best players in the world, in McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah.
Their second, third, and fourth line may not be performing. They can at least turn to McDavid and Draisaitl and say, hey, go win us a hockey game. You know how I know that? I saw them do it against the Blues.
Yeah, because
where
those
their
guys play
second through
27
fourth line
minutes a
did not
night.
play well, but they could still turn to their superstars and say, hey, we need you to carry us for a game or for a
It
stretch.
took
and they can
Edmonton
do that.
13 years to find those guys, though.
Have you looked
That's
up?
part. It is hard.
Have you looked up what Elias Pettersson has done this year? Because I know, Alex, you're doing pregame. I'm sure you've seen it. And I'm not trying to be dismissive. I'm just saying, like, have you looked up what Elias
He's got
Pettersson
like 70
has done?
points, doesn't he?
No.
No, he's not
Like
been
half
good.
of that.
Yeah, he is not
Elias
been good.
Pettersson on the season, to your
And
point,
that's
T-Bone,
what I'm saying, yeah.
has 15 goals and 43 points this year. 15 goals, 43 points. He's supposed to be one of the best players in the NHL. Why is Vancouver having a down year? Boom, that's it. You have to look no further. They traded JT Miller in part because they needed to get Pettersson going. Pettersson has still not been able to get it going. For context, Braden Shin of the St. Louis Blues has 16 goals and 43 points.
All I've heard was Braden Shen is Elias Pettersson.
So Pettersson has basically been for Vancouver what Braden Shin has been for the Blues.
Yeah.
Braden Shin's having a good season for his standards at this point in his respective career. Braden Shin right now is 5th on the Blues in points.
Yep.
5th.
Yep, Pettersson's making $11.5 million, and the problem when you go star power is $11.5 million now with the cap going up, but it's going to keep the cap at a pretty tight spot, so you're going to have to find guys who could just be role players. Toronto is another really good example of this where they've tried to build around stars and can't get past the first round. Pack mentality, again, it's probably the most difficult thing to achieve, but if you do it right and you find the right players, it can do what the Blues did from 2011 to 2021.
Blues versus Vancouver on the ice tonight right here in St. Louis. 5:30 pregame, 6:30 puck drop right here on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario will have your pregame coverage starting at 5:30. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, our regional breakdown. The West region doesn't tip off until 6 o'clock tonight. It's the last region that'll be in action this evening. Mizzou, one of the first games that's going to be in action. They are a part of this region. We'll break it down for you every possible way. Coming up next here on 101 ESPN. Oh, yes, it is NCAA Tournament Day here on BK and Ferrario. The men's bracket is going. Creighton is at the half against Louisville. They are leading 49-34. Louisville can't get a stop in that one, and unfortunately, neither can High Point. High Point losing 35-25 against Purdue. So I know Joey is really excited to hear this. T-Bone about to start 0-2 along with myself and Alex Ferrario.
I got Purdue.
Good start to the bracket for the three of us here on the show. But in the West region, that's where we're going to have our success, boys. It does not tip off until 6 o'clock tonight. Arkansas versus Kansas is the first game. It sounds like Arkansas's leading scorer is going to be out for that one against KU. Mizzou, the second game to tip off, they will be playing against T-Bone's Drake Bulldogs. We'll get into that game, I'm sure, here in just a little bit. We begin our breakdown of the West region, where the number 1 seed is the Florida Gators. Number 2 seed is St. John's. With the game you're most intrigued to see in this region. T-Bone, for you, what is the number 1 game you're looking for in the West?
The number 1 game that I'm looking forward to is the Drake Bulldogs in Missouri, just because it is such a contrast in styles, right? You typically don't see this, and it becomes a battle of who can control the tempo. Can Drake keep Missouri to playing at a slower pace? If they can, my Bulldogs will be walking out victorious today. I truly believe that. But Missouri, the way you speed up a team that plays slow, you force turnovers, which Missouri is good at, and then you get up in transition. They can do that. They will walk away victorious today. I think this is going to be close. I'm not buying your whole 10-point win. Okay. I'm fascinated to see how this goes because there's such different styles being played on the court tonight.
Alex, for you, what's the game you're most interested in? Why are you looking forward to this St. John's versus Omaha matchup?
It's actually the Terps versus Grand Canyon, mostly because I want to see them meet up with Illinois at some point again. No, mine, of course, is the Mizzou one, but I'll go different. Memphis and Colorado State.
Yep, that's a good one.
And I know it's the Mountain West, but Colorado State's coming in, winning 10 straight games, winning their tournament. But Memphis is without their star, if I'm not mistaken. So when you don't so when you don't have that, to me, I actually have Colorado State with the upset. But I find it intriguing from the style that Colorado State plays, and for how Memphis is going to have to be handicapped a little bit without their big player.
Colorado State is one of the best players in the country going into this one. He's been.
Is he eligible for the draft? Did I see a mock draft with him like in the top 10, top 12?
Yeah, he's a stud.
Correct. Neek Clifford is his name, and he's one of the top 10 players in the country, according to Ken Palm. He's been amazing for them. Their head coach, Nico Medved, was one of the guys that I thought Mizzou might hire a couple of years ago when they went with Dennis Gates. He is, it sounds like, likely to get to be the next coach at Minnesota, according to some of the reports out there. So Nico Medved is the coach at Colorado State. I think they're going to not only win this game, but potentially get all the way to the Sweet 16. So I agree with you, Alex. That is the game that I'm most excited for, is Memphis versus Colorado State. Penny Hardaway has plenty of talent. One of their top 3 players is going to be out for this game. Going to be out probably for the tournament, it appears. But Colorado State, to me, is the one that I'm most interested to see. All right, the upset you like in the first round. T-Bone, I just mentioned one of mine. I think Colorado State is going to win outright. I believe they're actually favored, though, in Vegas. So it's not much of an upset despite the seeding of 5-12 matchup. What is your upset in this region? Go ahead and tell us about Drake.
Yeah, so I've got the Drake Bulldogs, guys. If you couldn't tell based on my great sweatshirt that I bought at Rally House for $100,
Worth it.
Worth it, 100%. I think they're going to be able to dictate the tempo. I think they play slow, and I think it kind of throws Missouri off of their game. I think it's going to be tight the whole way, but if it stays tight, then it becomes worrisome for a team that's always the higher seed. So give me the Drake Bulldogs. I think they're pulling off the upset today.
Yeah, I told you mine was Colorado State, but I can see Drake being an upset in the first round as well.
Should have gotten you a sweatshirt.
I'm going with Arkansas. Arkansas over Kansas is my upset in this region. Arkansas is a 5.5-point underdog. I know they're only a 10 seed, so it's not like a huge seeding upset, but by the point spread, it's actually a much bigger upset than if Colorado State were to win today. I know their leading scorer is out. I just don't believe in this Kansas team at all, man. They have been leaking oil down the stretch this season. They don't look like your typical KU squad. In conference play, they've been terrible offensively. I just don't know that they can score. I think Hunter Dickinson is one of the most overrated players in college basketball. I just don't like this KU team at all. So I've got Arkansas winning this one, and then ultimately you get Patino versus Cal.
I want
round 2 of the NCAA
I want
tournament.
Patino versus Bill Self because that's never happened before.
Not in the tournament.
Not in the tournament.
It's so surprising. Patino and Bill Self have been coaching for like
ever.
100 years.
Norlander and
The
Parrish
first
were
time
talking about it.
they played was at when Patino was at Iona.
Yeah, and Norlander asked Parrish on their podcast, he's like, have they ever played together? And Parrish was like, oh, yeah, they played at least 4 or 5 times. And he's like, wait, no, they've never played against each other.
First time they met was when Patino came back at Iona, and that was during a regular season non-con
So that's
game.
why
It's never happened in the tournament
I'm rooting
before.
for
It's crazy.
Kansas because I want to see that Patino versus Bill Self
All right,
second
the
round.
sleeper team. We're talking about the West region here, breaking down the West region, which is the region that Florida is the 1 seed, St. John's is the 2 seed, Mizzou is the 6 seed. Your sleeper team in this region to make it Sweet 16, Elite 8, T-Bone is who?
Man, I got to be honest. To me, there's not much of a sleeper team in this one because I think it's mostly chalk outside the one upset that I said. Maybe UConn because of what I talked about earlier of, hey, they're a great offensive team, but they can figure out their ish defensively for 2-3 games. They can be a team that can get to the Sweet 16, Elite 8. Problem is they run into Florida in the second round. So, I say that as UConn would be the pick for me when you ask that question. I don't think there actually is going to be a sleeper team that comes out of this one. I think we're going to see chalk across the board.
Well, T-Bone, you can put that Bulldog back in the doghouse outside because my upset is Mizzou, or my upset team going all the way, or the sleeper is Elite 8 Missouri Tigers. They're taking down Drake, they're taking down Texas Tech, and then losing to Rick Pitino and St. John's in the
My
Final
sleeper
Four.
team is Colorado State. I think they've got a real chance to be able to go deep into this tournament. When you have a star the way that they do, that's one of the prerequisites. You've got to have somebody that when we watch back and we see the one shining moment at the end of this tournament, who's the guy we're showing, right? Typically when you see those Cinderella stories, they've got a player that you remember that was symbolic of their run, and I think Colorado State has that player. So I'll go with them as the team that ends up potentially being the sleeper to go
false?
deeper into this tournament than we're expecting.
True or false? You didn't want to take Mizzou because you did want to BKO them.
The team that you're most confused by in this region
Me too.
is who, T-Bone?
Mine's Texas Tech because I know that they rate well when it comes to KenPom. I don't think they should be a 3C when you look at what their KenPom ranking is. But the one thing that really worries me about them is their size. They are tiny, man. Their center is listed at 6'9". That's not great for a big man, but he is athletic, which helps. I just worry about them being too small, and that is my biggest concern with Texas Tech. That's why I find them to be one of the most confusing teams in this region.
Mine's pretty simple. I've got St. John's as my confusing team.
They don't score.
They don't score at all. They're unbelievable defensively. I mean, they are the best defense in the country. T-Bone's right. They don't score. They lost earlier this year against Georgia in a non-con affair where Georgia, based on their record, based on their KenPom ranking, one of the best teams that they have played so far this year. So they haven't gone up against the elite talent that we're talking about them potentially seeing when they get deeper into the tournament this year. And they don't score with the best of the best. So I think St. John's is really good. I think they're probably going to get to at least the Sweet 16. But if they go up against one of Texas Tech or Mizzou, how do they keep up offensively? That's my big question going into this one. Everybody loves St. John. I think they've got a real shot to be able to go to the Final Four. But that offense really concerns me, and it's what's holding me back from taking them to go that deep.
I saw this stat to that point. St. John's is shooting 29.9% from beyond the arc this season. There have only been 2 teams to reach the Final Four since 2012 that have shot worse than 33%. Both Rick Pitino teams from Louisville.
There you go. That makes a lot of sense. I'm actually going to use your Missouri Tigers again in this same category because I'm confused, mostly because I know Drake's going to be not an easy opponent, but what you said about Texas Tech, I look at that and I say, cool, Mizzou could be Texas Tech then if they get past 8, and then you got St. John's, who's also a confusing team. I guess if you're hot at the time, maybe you could get another Florida Gators-Mizzou matchup, but I could also see Mizzou losing tonight. So that's where I really come down to the confusion.
All right, last thing that we've got here. Who's the team that you've got making it out of this one? What do you have in the Elite 8, and who do you ultimately think gets the Final Four from the West region?
I've got Florida St. John's, and I've got Florida getting to the Final Four from the West region.
I've got Florida taking down Texas Tech. Though they confuse me, I still am going to go off of their offensive numbers. I just think the Gators are the best team. I picked them to win it all, so I've got them getting to the Final Four.
I've got Florida over Texas Tech as well. Texas Tech has some injury questions. It sounds like most of their team is ready to go for the tournament, even if they're not ready for the first round at 100%. They should be good to go. They've got an excellent head coach. Off the court transgressions aside, no, that's Chris Beard. Their new head coach is one of the best defensive coaches in the country. I think Texas Tech is a really good team, and I've got Florida getting out of this thing. Florida's unbelievable, man. When I watch them, and this has been the case basically since Mizzou beat them earlier in the season, I don't know what they don't have.
Yeah,
They've
agreed.
got size. They've got a legit superstar guard who can shoot it. They've got a coach that has a previous history of taking lesser teams to the tournament. I don't know what it is that they're missing going into this tournament, and they're hot at the right time. So you combine it all, it's tough for me to bet against this Florida Gators team. All right, that's what we've got for the West region, Missouri's region. How far do you guys have Mizzou getting? You've got them losing in the first round, T-Bone?
Yeah, first round, they're done.
Alex, you got Sweet 16?
Yep, I got them into the second round and then losing to oh, no, I'm sorry. I have them beating Texas Tech and getting to St. John's and losing to St. John's.
I have them losing to Texas Tech in the second round. I didn't love doing it, but I couldn't be a full-blown homer. At one point, I had them going to the Elite Eight, and then I was like, I can't do that.
Take it.
You're going to hurt yourself emotionally, so I'm hedging. Emotionally, I'm in one place. Mentally, where my money's at, I'm in another place, so that's how I have this thing going in the West.
I remember about a month ago you had them winning it all.
Yeah.
What a weird change.
That's about a month, man.
Hey, man, a month changed a lot, and as we heard earlier today, when we talked to Drew King of PowerMizzou.com, two things that changed. One, defensive rebounding. Two, Caleb Grill stopped shooting it the way that he was. When those two things change, I've got to change my opinion. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, coming up next, The Athletic put together a rankings list earlier today of the best players in Major League Baseball, and they tiered it out based on different criteria that they have. How does the Central Division stack up compared to some of these other divisions in Major League Baseball? We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
On ESPN.
Spring Training Report on 101 ESPN. Our Redbird Spring Training Report is brought to you by Rawlings. Visit the all-new Rawlings experience at Westport Plaza today.
All right, we were going to talk about a players list. Top 100 players in Major League Baseball. The position player side of things was just released by The Athletic. We're going to talk about that here on the show. For those curious, the Cardinals had 4 players make their list position player-wise. Ended up with Mason Wynn, Nolan Arenado, Willson Contreras, and Brendan Donovan on that list. Other teams in the Central Division, the Cubs had 4, Pirates had 2, Cincy and Milwaukee both had 3. So you were tied with Chicago, most position players in their top 100. But Derrick Goold just released a questions and answers that he did with John Mozeliak. It's available now at STL Today's website online. And there's a few different quotes that I wanted to get into. We can just kind of go through these and get our reaction live on the air because, like I said, this literally just dropped, so we are reading it in real time. It's worth your time. Go check it out. But literally his first answer to me I thought was worth going ahead and getting your guys' reaction to. So Derrick Goold asked the following question. Back on Halloween of 2007, the Cardinals officially named you the next head of baseball operations. You inherited a team with a losing record, 2 eventual Cardinals Hall of Famers in Scott Rowland and Jim Edmonds, who soon requested a trade and some fissures in the front office. 4 years later, you were attending a championship parade. How do you look back on that time and your start in St. Louis? So he goes into it and says, hey, listen, we had some players that needed to be moved. We understood that, but we're going to have to do things a little bit differently. He then continued. One of the things that was very strategic was that we were going to do some things internally more than externally. So not relying as heavily on the trade market, not being as dependent on the free agent market, not saying we weren't going to use it. We knew for the Cardinals to have success that ultimately what we wanted to do was draft and develop our own talent. If you think of the young core at the time, Albert was a perennial MVP. Yachty had emerged as an elite catcher. It wasn't like we were starting from a blank whiteboard. It was about this massive change. It wasn't a massive change in strategy or approach. All of it was about creating opportunity. From Bill's standpoint, he wanted a more sustainable model. Goold asked the obvious and legitimately necessary follow-up there. Is history repeating itself? Mo said, we're still developing players. The difference is we don't have Albert or Yachty. Thank God.
We're finally there.
How long did it take for us to get to that answer? For somebody to publicly state the truth of what's gone wrong with the St. Louis Cardinals. Dude, they develop the connective tissue of a roster, position player-wise, as well as anybody in Major League Baseball. Look at the players that are on this list for The Athletic. Brendan Donovan is on there. Mason Wynn is on there. Lars Nootbaar, if he stayed healthy, would be on a list like this. I think Ivan Herrera might be on a list like this time next year. It's possible one of Nolan Gorman or Jordan Walker or Victor Scott or Alec Burleson, those guys could be on a list like this by the end of the year. You know what they're not? They're not Yachty and they're not Albert Pujols. What you're missing is the guys that are at the top of the list that I was just looking at, which is what you used to have. You used to develop them internally, your version of Mookie or Gunnar Henderson or Judge or Ohtani, guys that go by one name. That's what you had. You had Albert and Yachty, Betts, Judge, Ohtani, Soto, Bobby. Those are the guys at the top of a list like this. You don't have them anymore. That's what's fallen off. So when I read that, the rest of the thing we can get into, but that quote in and of itself I thought was the number one most important thing, and it's refreshing to hear Mo finally say it out loud.
Well, and I totally agree with you, and apologies for fast-forwarding through this article, but I got to it a little earlier, and so I got to this flurry of back and forth between Derrick and Mo, and this plays into the Yachty and Albert thing. Derrick said there was a storm of events, including 3 manager hires, a federal investigation, draft pick forfeits, the pandemic. Do you have a sense why it was difficult to course correct, why it took so long? Mo snarkily, took so long, interesting statement. Where are you now, and where are we now is when you look at this in totality, these were things that we just could not keep trying to put a Band-Aid on or quick fix. The decision now is to play the longer game, allow our system to become productive, and then try to use those resources, free agency and trade, to augment. Whereas I think in the last 5 or 6 years, we were trying to use free agency and trades to fix the problem. To me, that's the quote that I wanted from him. For the longest time, what you were doing is you were trading and signing all of these guys because you had no system, and you said, well, we got to go out and find these placeholders, and we got to trade for Arenado and trade for Goldschmidt and sign these players because we need somebody to fill the void of stars. Now what he's saying is where you just went through. You've got all the complementary pieces. You're developing the system. Now you're just loading up so that when, and hopefully this means when they're in a better financial situation, as he says in the piece, you take those pieces and you aggressively go get the one-name star that you can't develop.
And to me, it was twofold. Two things happened simultaneously, right? One of the things that helped them prop themselves up for so long was their ability to develop starting pitching.
Yeah.
They just constantly had this conveyor belt of starters that were coming up to the major league level. And so instead of having to go out to the free agent market or the trade market to go acquire those guys, they weren't spending the money or the resources in trade capital to acquire pitchers. They had those internally. Well, when that stopped, now you're spending money and trade capital to go get it. And at the same time, you have stopped developing the superstar position player. And so those two things happen so you're spending money on the rotation, and now we're spending our prospects on the star position player, and now where we end up is just stuck.
Yeah.
And there's no way out. So it is a little refreshing to hear Mo admit what we've all seen from the outside looking in for years. And I don't blame them for getting to that place. Like, I blame them for having to adjust because they allowed it to get to that place. I should correct that. I don't blame them for trying to solve the problems the way that they did. They had to. They had no other options internally. The problem is that they had no other options internally, and they allowed their system to get to where it goes. And I think actually what Goold said there, Mo gave a snarky response. What he said is totally fair.
Oh, I agree.
It did take too long to get to this place today. I think they were about 2 years, maybe 3, behind the 8 ball on adjusting and seeing what was happening within their own system.
Yeah, that I agree with, because you're right. Like, I don't blame them for what they tried to do with the rotation to fix it, because they had stars too. Like, and they got the stars by trading some of the prospects they developed. Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado. They had 2 straight years where they had that third star. O'Neill had the 1 year where he played like an MVP. And then you had Albert get back to prime Albert in his final season here. So they had the position players. Where they really ended up lacking was their minor league system completely failed them. And that's due to what you're saying is they didn't realize that their minor league system was failing them and that they were falling behind on the times as to what they needed to do. If they were able to catch that, who knows what the Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado era goes down as, because now it goes down as a complete failure because they didn't end up winning anything meaningful. They didn't win a playoff game here in St. Louis. Now you look at it and go, man, what would have happened if the Cardinals could have recognized that, hey, we are falling behind. We are no longer the industry standard for how you develop starting pitching. Instead of saying, hey, we probably got to start changing things or we're going to run into problems, and they never noticed that, never admitted to doing that.
All right, Jordan Deacon is back with us in the studio today. Normally we would do the junk drawer coming up next, but I think we got to stick with this. It's a good piece that just came out a little bit ago on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website. It's a Q&A with Cardinals President of Baseball Operations John Mozeliak in his final year, where they're at, how they got here. There was a really interesting quote that T-Bone showed me as well on what this offseason was like for John Mozeliak to go through. We'll talk a little bit more about this, hear from you guys as well. 314-399-9646 is the Air Cover Service text line, and the YouTube chat is available for you at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. More on this Q&A with Mo next year on 101 ESPN.
College basketball.
All right, so we're talking about this conversation that John Mozeliak had with Derrick Goold. He wrote about it over at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch website. You can check it out over there. STLtoday.com is the place where you can go. I think there's quite a bit to get into here. Again, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. YouTube chat is available at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. In our last segment, we talked about one of his first answers to Derrick Goold, where he basically said, hey, listen, like, we used to develop superstars, or we did develop a couple of superstars in Yachty and Albert, and now we don't have those guys. And that's the biggest thing that's changed in his tenure here in St. Louis. And it's refreshing to hear him say that because it seems as though this offseason everybody was saying the Cardinals system is broken, it's broken, it's broken. I don't view it that way. Their development on the pitching side was broken, and they didn't develop a superstar position player, but they're still developing a lot of good position players. So let's get into the rest of this. He also had this one. T-Bone, this is one that you wanted to pinpoint, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He was asked about the offseason and how this was because the expectations are so much different going into 2025 than they've been basically every other year of Mo being in charge here in St. Louis. And Mo said the following, quote, this offseason has been different. It was not normal. Historically, I think every other offseason I've been a part of, the question that we had to answer was how can we improve? This year, we looked at other ways to reduce payroll. Just really didn't have any momentum to get anything going. That was a big change in a typical offseason strategy. Candidly, I felt it was the most stress I've ever experienced because I didn't feel like we were ever really moving forward. And when you're just stuck in the mud or not progressing, that part is tough, end quote. T-Bone, what'd you make of that quote?
I felt it was nice to hear Mo admitting that they're stuck in the middle, essentially, going into the season. I mean, that's what he's saying right there is, hey, we didn't find a way to improve, and I'm not sure they really had much of a plan to improve externally this offseason. But he admits right there, I mean, essentially, hey, the offseason was a failure. We couldn't move on from Nolan Arenado, and we're stuck in the middle because of it. Now, they can still achieve a youth movement, as we've talked about in the past, by moving Lars Nootbaar into center field, and we've talked about that this week, is, hey, are they going to go with Nootbaar in center field? That way it frees up at-bats for Burleson, and then you can really start to see this youth movement to where none of the young guys are blocked while Arenado is here. But we both know, all three of us are skeptical that they're going to do that, or even that they're going to carry Victor Scott, even if that means blocking Burleson for at-bats. So I found it refreshing for Mo to come out and not try the whole game of, oh, well, you know, we still have Arenado. He's a good player. He helps us. No, he basically came out and said, yeah, we're stuck. And we tried to go a direction this offseason. We couldn't make it happen, and we are stuck in the mud, as he said it.
Here's a question for you guys, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to go check this one out because it is Mo. And, I mean, at least for me, from what we've heard in terms of the 18,000 press conference we've had over the last couple of years, this is a pretty honest Mo.
Very.
Does this change the perception of him for Cardinals fans?
No.
Because he put the organization here.
And you know, the other quote for me that really stuck out was him talking about, look, I work for the ownership.
Let me read that real quick because it's one that I wanted to make sure that we get to. Here's this one. How do you feel such a shift in goal is happening about such a shift in goals is happening in your final year? So basically, are you comfortable with the fact that your final season is going to be one in which it's not necessarily about winning the World Series? That's not the stated goal going into the season. Here's Mo's response to that. My responsibility is I represent ownership. I represent Mr. DeWitt. And I understand the business climate. And if that's something I didn't want to be a part of, I had a choice.
Yeah, and so I agree with what you guys said, that this is not going to change the perception for a lot of people with John Mozeliak. And I think you and I have gone to bat for Mo an awful lot over the last few years for the success that he has had.
I think you guys are paid by the Cardinals.
But that, yeah, I know, I wear the bow tie all the time.
I would love to get those checks.
God,
that would help me with my basement
wonderful.
renovation.
It would help me with a lot feeding my babies. Him saying that, and then a little bit later on, Derrick asked him, you know, do you feel like he stayed in the role too long?
Here's the quote on that one. You could argue that. Do I think it? No. But I could understand somebody suggesting it.
I think this humanizes John Mozeliak a little bit more for a lot of people, because to a lot of people, he's public enemy number one because of what T-Bone mentioned. He's put the organization in this spot. But to me, that DeWitt one tells you exactly where things have happened. They were willing to do what Mo wanted to do when it was a competitive era, and they were doing it. It went south. They changed their direction of the organization, and that change of the direction of the organization put them in a spot where they're at now.
I do think he stayed in too long.
I agree.
I think what he said there is like more than fair to say, when he was announced as the president of baseball operations, it probably should have actually been the transition into the next guy. Baseball changed, man. And it changed not just in terms of the way that it was played and what was necessary in order to get an edge. It also changed in terms of the financial landscape. And this is another quote that I wanted to get to. Alex, you found the other two quotes that I want. There was 3 quotes that I wanted to make sure that we got to before the end of the segment. You got 2 of them. The other one that I wanted to react to is he was asked, do you have concerns for how a market the size of St. Louis will be able to compete in this climate? And Mo said, quote, I do. You really need to get a lot of things right below. With the changing TV market landscape, that's real. Hopefully, St. Louis does get to experience some exciting renovations at Busch over time to enhance the fan base enjoyment. There are going to be some challenges. It's not 2010.
The good news is Michael Gersh is in charge of that.
Sweet.
So,
friend of the show.
I think the reality of where the Cardinals are at is going to be really interesting to watch over the next 3 to 5 years.
I agree.
And I'm not sure people are ready for it. I'm not sure people understand it. This team, the financial changing landscape that is in front of them, is unlike anything they have seen before. Because the gap between the biggest markets and everybody else is only widening year by year by year. Did you guys see what happened this past weekend or this past couple of days in Japan? The LA Dodgers basically created a second market.
Yeah.
They have a country that is now going to be following them as a fan base.
This is why the next CBA to me is so fascinating.
Millions and millions of dollars will be pouring in for LA right as we got this new RSN deal where you're going to be able to go direct to consumer. And so I find this to be fascinating in that, okay, they've got this extra market, and you've got New York that has this great TV deal, and you've got LA that has a great TV deal. Chicago's got a decent. What does this mean for everybody else, man? So the Cardinals, I don't think this is a one-off. I think that they are going to start going more in this direction of they're not going to be the Rays, they're not going to be the A's, they're not going to be that, but could they start operating more like Milwaukee? Yeah,
Milwaukee,
I think
Cleveland were
that's
the two that I thought of.
probably going to be where this team ends up. And man, that is not something this fan base is used to, and I don't think they're going to react positively to it. I don't blame you for it, but I do think some of it is kind of understandable because it's a financial limitation that you have that these bigger markets don't.
Unless this CBA negotiation changes the landscape of baseball also. And
I don't think it's going to. Man.
I don't
They're
either.
They're not going to get a cap. They should. I think it's the best thing for the sport, and I think for 25 fan base, it would be a good thing.
I don't
but
either.
I don't think they're doing it.
But when a lockout happens, a lot of people have to change their mind when you don't bring in money for an entire year with the threat of potentially another year.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to say, as BK was talking about the changing landscape in sports, St. Louis needs to be rooting for a salary cap to come to baseball. It's the only way. I agree with what BK said. I don't think the Cardinals fan base is ready for the shift that you're going to have to see the Cardinals take, and they're going to have to do it based on the way the TV landscape is and the superpowers that live on the coast right now between Cohen and the Mets, the Yankees, and the Dodgers, who, as you just said perfectly, have Japan as their next market now. The Cardinals fan base needs to be rooting for a cap because, to me, it's the only way that they're going to be able to flex any might to where they can spend to try and get superstars potentially, and even then it's going to be tough to do. But I think that is the best case for Cardinals Nation.
You exploited the system for 18 years, as Mo kind of pointed out, where they were ahead of the curve. And when baseball changed to this direction, that's where the salary cap had to come into play. And until it does, and I'm with you, BK, it's going to be very – I highly doubt it happens. But when you go into a lockout and owners aren't getting millions and billions of dollars put into their pockets, not just for a year, but the threat of a second year, that's when things start to really change. And a cap benefits teams like St. Louis.
It does. First of all, I think it's really hard to implement because, like, how do you do it? So the
expansion draft. Everybody has no players. You start from scratch.
Dodgers are paying, what, $300 million for their opening day roster?
Yeah.
So is it suddenly going to be a $200 million cap? And if so, how do you make that work?
We'll take our time.
When does it start to be implemented? The logistics of it are really difficult to figure out. But even just beyond that, I don't think the players are going to agree to it. I think it's wrong. I think that they are arguing against their own self-interest for 95% of the league. I think you're arguing in favor of 5% of the league having the ability to make $50 million right now.
And when those 5%ers aren't getting paychecks, that's when you really start to wonder.
But they don't care.
They don't care.
They've
They
got
control
the
the
$50
union.
million that last year they made in the bank. The problem is for the guys, the other 90%, the guys that are on the pre-arb deals that are getting a few $100,000 a year, and 4% of that is going to their agent, 50% of that is going towards taxes. And, like, I'm not telling you woe is me for baseball players. They live a really, really good life. But when they don't have checks coming in, it's a little different for the 25-year-old that's been living off of $30,000 a year while he's been a minor league baseball player for the last 5 years. He finally last year got a taste of the big leagues, and now he's got to live off of everything that he made last year for this upcoming year as well. Those are the guys that end up getting desperate, and they just start to agree to whatever is being presented to them. So it's hard to get to that place, and it results in teams in the middle class, like the Cardinals, once again, kind of getting screwed. So I don't know where this is going. I would be lying to you if I said that I do.
High five, guys. Optimism for the future.
It's hard to be super optimistic about the direction of what this means for teams like the Cardinals. They're just going to have to operate differently. And I don't know that there's anybody that'll be more affected than a team like specifically the St. Louis Cardinals, maybe the San Diego Padres, now that they have a different financial ownership situation in place.
Guys, this conversation's ruining my March Madness
Let's
vibe.
talk
Coming up
Blues.
next, how did the Blues handle their goalie situation right now? Huge game tonight for the Blues going up against the Vancouver Canucks. What are you doing net? Not just tonight, but moving forward. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN. All right, Alex, your Wisconsin versus Montana game has actually been relatively interesting.
I wonder if I could get an apology at some point today for Mr. Snarky Pants over
You
there.
absolutely will not. 3 minutes to go in the first half. Wisconsin up 34-27. It's been a relatively back and forth type of game.
Pretty
SIUE
interesting.
in the tournament this year, and they are down 14-6 about 5 minutes into that one. They're taking on Houston. It's a really tall task, but
It was fun while it lasted.
It good season nonetheless. They got
did
into the
lead.
tournament. Ultimately, that's what matters. Down 14-6, 5 minutes into that one. The big game, though, that everybody's watching right now, Purdue up 47-41. High Point has come out in the second half, played pretty well thus far, especially defensively. 47-41, Purdue still up, but High Point at least making that one interesting. And our first game is approaching the end of this one. Creighton up 77-63 with 3 minutes left to play against Louisville. So those are our 4 games in action right now. Your biggest reaction right now to those 4 games, T-Bone, is what?
A little surprised by how much Creighton dominated Louisville. We talked about them a little bit as felt like they were underseeded. Turns out, no, Kimime got that one right. So that one's probably my biggest surprise. Also shocked that High Point made this a game. You know,
Yeah.
they kind of fell out of it down 10 at halftime. I thought, okay, Purdue's ready to put this one away, but credit to High Point. They're at least going to make it interesting down the home stretch.
Mine is how intrigued I am with this Montana-Wisconsin matchup. I mean, it is compelling stuff with one more half to go.
You're the worst.
It's crazy for somebody to say that has no interest at all.
All right,
you know?
relax. They're about to make it a double-digit lead.
Just because it's a 3 versus a 14. It's
I
wild.
think the lesson from that Creighton game is pretty simple. 3-pointers are the great equalizer.
Yeah.
I mean, Creighton in that one is 11 for 24 from beyond the arc, and Louisville is 6 for 25. One team is shooting nearly 50%. The other team is shooting less than 25%.
Creighton's dominated
Story of the game.
in the paint, too. Their big man has just wiped away
Well, he's
anybody.
amazing.
Yeah, it wiped away anybody that's come underneath the basket.
Yeah, he's one of the better players in the country. He's been there for a hot minute at this point in time. He's been part of their previous runs in March as well. Yeah, this is year 5 for him. He has started every year of his career there.
The old red shirt.
Good player. All right, so let's get into the Blues. They're back in action this evening. And, Alex, you asked us a question before the show today about the goaltending situation. They're going up against Vancouver tonight. I don't know if it's been officially announced, but Benner's going to be in net for them. He's going to go up against them. They wanted him refreshed, ready to go. That's why they went with Hofer against Nashville. How do you handle it from here? Because recently, Alex, they've been going 1-1-1-1. Basically, since that Anaheim game, it's been them splitting the net. Do you continue doing that? Do you go back to more of a Bennington share? How do you view this?
I find this fascinating because of the way that they've handled it and how many games they have moving forward, because my gut originally was this is going to be a bulk of Bennington, even despite the amount of games that they're going to play. But just look at how the schedule plays itself out. Bennington versus Vancouver, you got a back-to-back, which would tell me Hofer gets Chicago, and then Bennington would get Nashville. And then you'd probably go Hofer after that one against Montreal to give a different look to Nashville once again. And then you get a Hofer versus the Colorado Avalanche. Now, I don't know if that's really what takes place. My gut tells me they do stick this 1-1-1 because of how many games, because of how much travel they have coming up with a couple of home games, and then they go back on the road. And really where you're going to want to unleash Jordan Binnington, who's not fatigued, is April 7th through the 12th. Or really the 15th, where it's Winnipeg, Edmonton, Seattle, and Utah.
And I would throw in Colorado in there as well.
Probably.
The 5th through the 15th, that's really where you begin your stretch
That's
run.
the stretch, and that's where you hope that you've gained some ground or at least separated yourself from a couple of these teams. But because you play, 6 more games in the next 10 days, 9 days, I do think they're going to go 1-1-1 all the way up until that Nashville Predators game, and then maybe you separate it, which in my opinion, Utah couldn't do that. Calgary couldn't do that. Vancouver couldn't do that because they don't have goalies that you can rely on. The Blues actually have the luxury of doing that, so Binnington is healthy for April and ready to go.
Yeah, like you mentioned Winnipeg.
Yeah.
I don't think they want to do that.
No.
That's part of this is like they want their number one goalie to be in net for 65 games. The Blues don't.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a million different times. Benner is best when he's starting like 50 games in any given season. And I think that's kind of the goal is let's keep this guy fresh. We don't want him getting fatigued. We know how important he is for us in these big games like tonight against Vancouver. We don't want him operating at 80% of full capacity. We need him at full strength going into this one. And the same thing is going to be true when they take on Colorado a couple of times down the stretch. When you take on Winnipeg head-to-head, or you go up against Utah in that final game of the regular season. I need Benner to be at his best once we get to the month of April. So I think that's probably the way that you operate, is going back and forth to split the net, because A, you trust Hofer. He's been good for you.
Yeah.
But B, that's the best way that you get peak version of Jordan Binnington.
And that's what, to me, makes Hofer like the most pivotal player for the Blues in this, whatever it is, 2-3 week stretch that we're talking about. Because if they are going 1-1-1, look, I agree, Hofer's been good this season. I also know Hofer's been a little inconsistent at times this season. And if you told me, I asked a question a couple days ago of, hey, like, what is the one thing that you would look at the Blues and say you're a little pessimistic about? Two things for me. One would be the PK, that it's going to continue to play this well. And the second would be, hey, if we are turning to Hofer this much, that Hofer's going to consistently be able to hold par for par with Jordan Binnington because of his inconsistencies. There's games where he looks great, like he did against Nashville. He was awesome in that game. I've also seen games where I look at him and go, oh, he's the reason you lost that hockey game.
Yeah.
So to me, because of what we're talking about, making sure you keep Binnington fresh, while also realizing, hey, you are in the heart of this playoff race right now, and it is pushing for the final 13 games. Hofer for the next 2 weeks becomes maybe the most pivotal St. Louis Blue, because he's, no offense to him, the guy I trust the least on the team right now.
And big picture, I think the importance on that is they set the challenge at the beginning of the season where David Alexander had told Joey and Curbs, look, we want to give Hofer a little bit more of a challenging schedule than what last year was to see how he handles it. That's the growth development of your goaltenders. And if he handles it well down the stretch and plays par for par with Jordan Binnington, well, now you've got legitimately that 1A, 1B for next season, and then beyond that, you get to the conversation of, is Hofer ready to be the number one guy? This is the start of that when you get these types of scenarios for a Joel Hofer.
He's Alex Ferrario. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Blues back in action tonight. Pre-game coverage with Alex begins at 5:30. Big one tonight against the Vancouver Canucks. Your latest update, scores from around the NCAA tournament. High Point has, once again, it looks like Purdue's kind of pushing that lead back to double digits. They're up 56-47 now. At the half, we've got Wisconsin up 40-32 against Montana, and Houston is already pulling away. It's 24-8, about halfway through the first half. Houston over SIUE. Again, 24-8. 10 minutes in to that one.
Don't give up.
Well.
They got to run in them. They got to run in SIUE, I believe.
Next game to tip off will be Alabama State taking on Auburn, another 16 versus a 1. And then at 2:15, right after the fast lane begins, McNeese and the fighting Will Wade, who already has accepted another job. He's coaching at McNeese today. He might be at NC State tomorrow. All right. He's going up against Clemson, his alma mater. Will Wade versus Clemson at 2:15. Coming up next, we continue our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2025 season with number 7 on our list. We'll get to that next year on 101.
2025 season. Number 7.
He had a couple of hits in game 1. Drives this one a long way toward right. Back goes Suzuki. Back up against the wall. He leaps up. Can't get it. It's a home run. He shaped that baby just like the Gateway Arch.
Willson Contreras.
We continue our countdown of the 20 most important Cardinals for the 2025 season with the number 7 on our list. It is Willson Contreras. I had him at number 11 on my list. T-Bone had him at number 8 on his list. Alex Ferrario had Willson Contreras at number 2 on his list.
This is a surprise to me.
Of the 20 most important Cardinals for 2025. You average it out, he came out at number 7 on our overall show list for the upcoming season. Willson Contreras was a badass last year at the plate. 17 doubles, 15 homers, 36 ribbies. You may hear those numbers and say to yourself, BK, that's not super impressive. He did that in 84 games. He basically did that in half of a regular season because of the injuries. Now he's going to be playing first base and DH this upcoming season, which, fingers crossed, should help allow him to stay on the field more often. If you projected those numbers from last season over a 150-game year for Willson Contreras, 30 doubles, 27 homers, 65 ribbies. That is what it projects to. If you're looking for guys that did that last year, for example, with the kind of on-base percentage that Willson Contreras has averaged for his career, which is 350, Rafael Devers, Bryce Harper, Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Marcell Ozuna, Bobby Witt Jr., Aaron Judge, Gunnar Henderson, Vlad Guerrero, and Yordan Alvarez.
You said 65 ribbies. Why do I feel like there'd be more of them?
Because nobody was on base last year for the St. Louis Cardinals, as you can
I actually wasn't
imagine.
snarky on that one. I was actually really curious. I'm like, those numbers seem like 95 RBIs.
Yeah. Those were the top 10 hitters in baseball last year, basically, is what we're talking about here. So that kind of hitter in the middle of your order really changes things. T-Bone, I want to get your thoughts, but Alex had him all the way up at number 2. Was it for that reason?
It was for that reason, and so I did a little, maybe too much overthinking for this one. Because, again, I'm thinking 2025 competing, but I'm thinking competing for the next few years. That's an impact bat. That's a guy that you center your offense around. But also, why I was probably overthinking this, you got to hope for development for your younger players. And you know how you develop them? You don't rely on them being the number 1 dude. And if Willson Contreras is going to have any impact on this team, obviously for this year's competing, that's where Contreras is going to shine. But for the next couple of years, you're going to be looking at the defense at first base if he's going to be playing there a significant amount of time, because it could be his position moving forward. But then I don't have to worry about Jordan Walker being an impact bat, worrying about Nolan Gorman being an impact bat. Hey, even a Mason Wynn being an impact bat. Willson Contreras has got this under control, because with Nolan Arenado back, you typically think he's going to kind of hang out in that spotlight, but I don't think he's going to live up to it. So that's why Willson Contreras was so impactful for me, because the impact of this team being good this year and beyond is going to come down to his bat being consistent.
Yeah, he cracked my top 10 because if you want to win in 2025, and again, I did my list winning in 2025 as part of the thinking in this, along with looking into the future for the Cardinals. Well, if you want to win in 2025, he can be an MVP caliber if he stays healthy. I mean, you read off the numbers on what his pace would be. You know who that looked a lot like? William Contreras, his brother, who finished 5th in MVP voting last year. I wouldn't be shocked if he could do what his brother did last year, which is be a top 10, potentially a top 5 MVP caliber guy, especially for hitting in the middle of the Cardinals order. He's the one guy that I look at the middle of their order and say, I trust. I know what you're going to get from him. It's just a matter of staying healthy. But also when you look at beyond 2025 for the Cardinals, it is, hey, you need, in my opinion, 3 impact bats. Well, he's under contract for another 2 years after this year. All right, so there is 1 in Willson Contreras. Now we got to figure out the other 2. But the other thing, and this is what's important if this goes south for the Cardinals this year, if he can play good defense at first base and he hits, he has trade value. And if the Cardinals want to go to him again and say, hey, look, we're back in this spot. Do you want to go to a contender? We've got a call to potentially trade you. Maybe he says yes. Maybe get some value for him. If the Cardinals wanted to trade him this offseason, or I know the Cardinals wanted to move on from him, but if Willson would say, yeah, I'm open to it, I don't think they could have moved him. All of baseball didn't value him because he didn't have a position, right? The Cardinals were the last team in baseball to figure out he wasn't a catcher.
Yep.
So I think if he can play a good first base, continue to show he's an impact bat, he not only helps the Cardinals in the here and now and in the long term, but potentially has trade value if things do go south.
Even if he doesn't play great defense at first base and becomes a DH because Burleson takes over at first, if he hits the way that we're talking about, he has value across Major League Baseball. And the reason why is because now he doesn't view himself as a catcher anymore. And that's really important, man. Sometimes it takes the player to acknowledge what everybody else is seeing for you to get to the place where everybody in Major League Baseball can value you. He can be J.D. Martinez. Like, that's what he could be for the next 5 years. He just becomes I don't know if he's going to have the same, like, numbers as J.D. Martinez did, but J.D. Martinez was just always a really helpful right-handed bat that ended up, like, having a next 7 years of his career after transitioning, from the outfield?
Yeah.
Because he was a really good hitter. So teams valued him, and he extended his career accordingly. Willson Contreras could be that guy in Major League Baseball as well. But the guy he absolutely rakes. He's not as much of a home run hitter probably as, like, what you would think based on how hard he hits the baseball. But the dude's going to hit 30-plus doubles this year, potentially. So I think he's going to have a great season. I don't have a whole lot of concern about him. T-Bone mentioned something, though. You brought up the name Nolan Gorman. And now this kind of alleviates the pressure of Gorman being in that middle of the order. You're looking for those other guys that can be around Willson Contreras as the middle of the order hitters. You need 3 of them. To me, one of the things that I'll be most curious about this year is how this all fits around Gorman. Because we were talking about the lineup yesterday and the Victor Scott conversation. Man, so much of that is about Arenado, but that's a sunk cost now. If Arenado wants to be here and other teams in baseball don't value him the way that you want him to, he's here. There's nothing you can do about it. So you got to sit him and forget it, right? He's going to be in your lineup every day. It is what it is. The other way you can make this work is with Newt in center, but that's something they don't necessarily love, and it's for a lot of Cardinals fans, it's not something that you want. So the one other scenario, and I think a lot of Cardinals fans would be in favor of this one, is pulling Nolan Gorman out of the lineup, either trading him or just sitting him on the bench and he becomes a left-handed bat off of your bench. What do you guys think is the leash for Nolan Gorman this year? How long do you think that is?
If I'm the Cardinals, the leash is all season. This is supposed to be about what? Getting answers, right? You're telling me after 2 months you believe the Cardinals are going to say, we've got our answer on this guy? I don't buy that. For them to have the answer, you need to see 162. Whether he's injured, which my guess is most likely you're going to see injuries take place and the cold spells happen. And on the Cardinals, your leash is all season because this isn't about competing. Our guys that we're wanting to see reps from, they're going to get them at some point. This is about finding out, who are you, Nolan Gorman?
For me, it's 2 months. I don't think he's getting the full season because right now he's the whole reason Victor Scott's not here. Assuming he's not going to be here, I should say. But I think when you look at it, if he doesn't make the adjustments, man, and he's striking out at the clip he was last year, which was 37%, that tells you you don't need a full season to know that he's not adjusting to big league pitching. You'll know in 2 months. First month can be wacky, and we've seen that Gorman goes through, even at his best, he will go through a month where he just does not hit, but then he'll have a month where he really hits for power. 2 months, you're going to know. And if he's not hitting, they've got plenty of options to replace him in the lineup. They can move Donovan to second. Burley becomes the DH. You can push Newbar back to left, and Scott can go back into center field. So for me, he has got a shorter leash than I think Cardinals fans are expecting.
Yeah, my honest answer is I don't know. I don't know what they're going to look at this as. And so much of this is about the context around him. Are there injuries? That's one thing. Is Victor Scott crushing it at AAA? I think that's maybe the most important thing. Because if Victor Scott is just kind of fine, he doesn't look great, he doesn't have the same kind of numbers as he did this spring for the Cardinals, well, there's no pressure to get Nolan Gorman out of the lineup because nobody's hitting their way up to the big league level.
Sure. You're
not forcing him into the lineup if he's not crushing the baseball down at AAA. There's no reason to do so. So I think that's probably like the biggest prerequisite. And then from there, like, how's the rest of the lineup construction looking? Are you getting positive returns from some of these other young guys in their limited opportunities where it forces you to take a harder look at them than you are with Nolan Gorman? Like, is Newbar just a complete failure in center field? Is this clearly not working with him in center? So it's the context around him that plays into what the leash is for Gorman. I think they would like it to be what Alex is saying, which is the whole year. But if Newt struggles in center and Victor Scott is crushing it down in AAA and Gorman is struggling again, that could lead you to him getting a 2-month leash like T-Bone is saying. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, we'll hit the rewind. Right now, I'll give you a quick update. Purdue up 63-56 with 5 minutes to play against High Point. At the half, Wisconsin is up 40-32 against Montana. And Houston is up 34-16 with 5 minutes left in the first half against SIUE. Coming up next, we're going to get the Vancouver side of things as Harman Dayal joins us here on BK and Ferrario to preview tonight's game between the Blues and the Canucks here on BK and Ferrario. With Alex and T1, I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We are broadcasting live today from Helen Fitzgerald's out here. We are watching all these basketball games that are taking place. It's a great day here in St. Louis as we get to take all of these games in. Our coverage today is presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. And right now we go out to the Callier and Thompson hotline to be joined by Harman Dayal. He joins us here on BK and Ferrario. You can read all of his great work covering the Vancouver Canucks over at The Athletic. He's covering tonight's game between the Blues and the Canucks, one of the biggest games in terms of playoff swing percentages in the NHL this year. Harman, we appreciate the time, man. Well, what is the number one thing that has led to the Canucks being where they are, which is battling for this spot, the last wild card spot with the Blues? A bit of a surprise for us here in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a strange year in Vancouver. A lot of things have frankly gone wrong for them. I mean, Elias Pettersson was expected to be a 90 to 100 point centerman, and he's instead barely on pace to crack 50 points, although he's been turning a corner lately, which has given Canucks fans some optimism. So with him underperforming, with the injuries that they faced to key core players such as Thatcher Demko, Philip Hronek in the first half, Quinn Hughes at times in the second half, Brock Besser at times in the first half, plus all the uncertainty around JT Miller and Elias Pettersson and the locker room dysfunction before Miller was ultimately dealt. It's been a really challenging year for the Canucks, especially when it comes to driving offense. I know they've been able to get on the board more consistently over the last few games now that Quinn Hughes is back in the lineup, but if you look at their scoring totals since January 1st, they're a bottom five team in the NHL at goals scored per game, and that's really been the biggest reason why they've perhaps underachieved expectations. Is they're still a pretty tight group defensively. They've gotten solid goaltending from Kevin Lankinen. Their PK is elite, but it's been a tough challenge for them to consistently manufacture offense.
Harman, I think the discussion here in St. Louis since the Blues have gotten hot out of the Four Nations break is, can they maintain this down the stretch with such an easy schedule? So I'll ask you the same question. Vancouver, of course, has kind of been roller coaster-esque since the Four Nations break. Do you think they can maintain this type of play to stay in this race down the stretch?
To me, it all comes down to Hughes and Pettersson leading the charge. I feel like with Quinn returning to the lineup, he'd missed 10 of the club's first 13 games from February 1st. And even now that he's returned to the lineup, he's still playing through injury. So he's not quite at 100%, but he's operating at close to an elite level. The Canucks have, they put up 6 on the Jets. They put up 6 over the weekend against the Blackhawks. He's such a game changer for them. Quinn Hughes is everything for this Canucks team, not only in terms of what he does offensively, but driving play, the elite defensive results. He's a catalyst on the power play. So for Vancouver, if he can stay healthy down the stretch and continue operating at an elite level, that's a huge boost, and that would make the success they've had over the last few games more sustainable, especially if it's in conjunction with Elias Pettersson maintaining the progress that he's shown over the last 8 games, where he's been scoring at around a point per game pace. That would give them, between Hughes and Pettersson, enough offense that their defensive solidity, how well they kill penalties, the solid goaltending they've gotten, if those two can lead the way offensively, then they've got enough defensively and in net to sustain the success that they've had over the last 4 games.
This is the start of what is one hell of a road trip for the Vancouver Canucks as they go to St. Louis tonight, and then their next 5 games at New York, at New Jersey, at the Islanders, at Columbus, at Winnipeg. They do not return home again until April 2nd against Seattle. So no more games in the month of March at home. Harman, my question for you, is it fair to say at the end of that road trip, you're going to have a pretty good idea as to whether or not this Vancouver Canucks team is going to be able to make it to the playoffs this year?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm curious internally what a realistic bar is for the results on that road trip, because the way I look at it, at a bare minimum, as difficult as that road trip is, you gotta pick up 3 wins, 3 of those 6 at least, and you also got to remember that the 6th game of that road trip is against the Jets, and I know the Canucks just shellacked Winnipeg the other night, but the Jets are the best team in the NHL for a reason. It's not going to be easy for them to do that twice, especially when you're tired at the end of a road trip. So ideally, you win 3 of your first 5 games on that road trip, so that you have a cushion in case you drop that game against Winnipeg. We'll see. I mean, a big storyline to watch too will be Kevin Lankinen's workload. He's been so good for the Canucks in net, but he's taken on a really heavy workload. He's already started a career high number of games through his career this season, and you can sense at times his game has started to slip just a little, and that's where Thatcher Demko. It's going to be fascinating to see if he's able to return at some point in the regular season. He's obviously battled injury troubles this year, but he returned to practice lately, and if he's able to give the Canucks a quality second option in net, it's not even so much about Demko necessarily returning to the elite Vezina caliber form that he showed last year, but it's almost just a huge benefit for Lankinen to get some nights off and not potentially be driven to the ground and have a situation where his performance starts to slip because of fatigue. Because the Canucks are in a situation right now where their current backup, Archer Shilovs, has had a really rough go of it this year, and so they're kind of leaning hard on Lankinen, and that's going to be a big storyline through this road trip, as well as what kind of goaltending they get.
Harman, where do you think the weak spot is for Vancouver's game right now?
It's the offense. On a lot of nights, they aren't able to generate shots. They aren't able to generate chances. They become way too reliant on Quinn Hughes to drive the bus, and it was encouraging for the team against Winnipeg to finally see Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser find some chemistry together on the top line. You're hoping they can sustain that, but that's only one game, and the fact of the matter is Besser did most of his damage last year as a 40-goal scorer, and in the first half, on line with JT Miller. Those two had tremendous chemistry, and since Miller's departed, it's been a struggle for Brock Besser to create offense. He was mired in a 12-game goal drought before he broke it by scoring twice against Winnipeg last night. So for the Canucks, if Pettersson and Besser can't continue producing together as a true top line, then they don't have enough firepower up front, especially with Filipino injured and Connor Garland banged up. He didn't play last night either. This is a thin top 6 group offensively, and if Pettersson and Besser aren't driving things, then they could go quiet offensively.
Harman Dayal is a Canucks reporter for The Athletic. That is where you can read all of his work. Check it out over there. It's really good stuff. Harman, thanks so much for hopping on with us today, man, giving us the Canucks perspective of tonight's game. Big one between the Blues and the Canucks at Enterprise Center. All the best, man. Enjoy yourself. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
You got it. That's Harman Dayal joining us here on 101 ESPN. Appreciate his time as always and giving us the opposing perspective of tonight's big game between the Vancouver Canucks and the St. Louis Blues. We'll talk about that a little bit more on the other side. We'll react to the action that we are witnessing right now in the NCAA tournament and put a bow on this thing as we hit the rewind next year on 101 ESPN.
Your home sold guaranteed realty. Selling your home begins at GloriaHasTheBuyers.com.
If you guys missed anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page. 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. It's all presented by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is super easy to use. It is free to download as well, and it is presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. Earlier today, we opened up with T-Bone debuting his new Drake hoodie that he paid $100 for.
I think it might be my favorite outfit I have in my closet now.
I'm a Kendrick Lamar fan.
Yeah? That's such a bad dad.
Did you really not get it? Because I saw the eyebrows furrow.
I just didn't.
I thought it was great.
No, it's terrible. Terrible.
I thought it was great.
Okay.
It was a bad dad joke. I thought it was funny as hell.
The tournament has debuted. We are watching some of the action. We are broadcasting live today for just another little bit out here at Helen Fitzgerald's. The Fastlane will be broadcasting live, though, until 6 o'clock. So come on out, say hello. They've got some drink specials going on. They've got the great food that you always expect out here. And it is all presented by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. T-Bone, you got to see last night. Xavier is going to be your first-round opponent. The Illini will be taking them on after they defeated Texas. Texas said, man, this was so bad that we're going to go ahead and fire our coach. So
Smart.
You get Xavier. Texas gets a new head coach here pretty soon. What'd you make of that game last night? How are you feeling about the Illini's chances?
I'm not feeling good about the Illini's chances. I said this in our group chat last night watching that game. Their resumes made them belong in the first 4 round. They're better than first 4 teams. I mean, those 2 teams were excellent in last night's game. I feel kind of bad for the Texas coach. He got fired after that performance, but man, Xavier looks good. I mean, they're going to shoot the 3-point shot well. They had spurts, and they weren't great defensively, but they had spurts where they could really lock it down defensively. And the other thing, too, is they can also go in the paint. Their big man looked really good in last night's game as well. I think Illinois is going to struggle against them, and I honestly think Xavier's going to beat them because Illinois is not shown to have resilience this season. My fear is Xavier gets hot early on from distance, gets a bit of a run to start the game off, and then Illinois is chasing the rest of the way, and we've seen them. They're not a good 3-point shooting team, and as we've seen, that can be a difference maker when it comes to March.
That game is tomorrow night. Games that we have already seen in action today. There have been 2 of them, and we are 0-2, Alex, to update our respective brackets. Creighton took down Louisville. That one was really never close, 89-75. High Point just lost this one going final just seconds ago. 32. 2 other games in action right now. Alex's favorite game of the day, Wisconsin is up 59-47. That one's been closer than you'd expect. Wisconsin now pushing that one a little bit away, 59-47 with 12 minutes left to play. And Houston just all over SIUE. It is what it is. 52-24 at the half in that one.
Well, you know what I always say, BK, win early, lose late. So watch out, Houston.
SIUE might cover the spread in the second half.
What was the spread in this one? Do you remember?
I have
It was
no
like
idea.
27 or something like that.
I'm saying you take SIUE plus whatever the points are in the second half.
Yeah, not great. All right, next games up are Alabama State at Auburn, or against Auburn. Auburn is a 31.5-point favorite in that one, and I think I would take them. Alabama State just doesn't have the size to be able to take on a team like Auburn. At 2:15, you'll have Clemson taking on McNeese. That is a 7.5-point line. I like Clemson in that game. Did you have a lean?
I like Clemson, too.
Mine
I think
was
they're very
Clemson. Okay.
balanced. Yeah.
So when we first saw these matchups, it's like, maybe McNeese, and then I think Clemson's just too much for them. Later on this afternoon, you got VCU against BYU. I like VCU in that one personally, and then Gonzaga against Georgia. Gonzaga is 6.5-point favorite as the 9 seed. I love the Zags to win that one against Georgia.
Georgia.
You got the Bulldogs?
I had Georgia when we talked about that region. Since then, I flipped. I've gone to Gonzaga. I
Georgia by 3.
BK was talking about their metrics because they're a team that grades out super well in the metrics. I think that ends up playing well in March.
The best player in that game will be on Georgia. Asa Newell is a really good player. He's a freshman for them, kind of like a stretch 4 type. So they will have their hands full with him, but otherwise I do think Drake is the better, or excuse me, I do think that Gonzaga
is the better team.
Drake is the better team
of
Drake.
Let's go.
That is really the headline here locally. 6:30, Drake versus Mizzou. If you missed it, we had a breakdown of this one with Drew King of Power Mizzou at 11:30. You can check out that conversation on the podcast page later on today. Drake is a 6.5-point underdog. They are the most bet team in terms of the number of tickets on them in Vegas of any underdog in this tournament in the first round. If you're looking at the brackets, they are the team that is an underdog that the most people have selected to advance to the next round. I like Mizzou. I think they win this one by 10 to 12 points. I think they end up covering the spread. I do think they'll be able to push the tempo, push the pace a little bit. I think Drake's defense might give them a little bit of issues early on. I do think they pull away 6 to 8 minutes in. The hope for me is that Caleb Grill finds his shot. If he finds a shot, I don't think any issues will be taking place today for Mizzou. If he doesn't, might be a little closer than you're expecting, but either way, I think they win.
I think Drake pulls off the upset. I mean, if it's a 6 to 8 point game going into the home stretch, that is not big enough for me to feel comfortable about Missouri and feel a little bit of pressure. You will start to see, that's when you start to see the higher seed start to really tighten up a little bit. I think Drake slows down the offense for Missouri. They keep it at their tempo, and if they do that, they dictate the tempo. I think they win. And Caleb Grill, I agree with you. Grill doesn't have a big game. I don't know if Missouri's winning against Drake.
I didn't say I don't think they win. If he doesn't have a big game, I think they win by like 6.
He or Mark Mitchell have to have a big game.
If he does have a big game, I think they can win by 20.
He or Mark Mitchell have to have a big game, one of those two. I think by the end of it, Mizzou will be saying Drake's not like us.
Okay,
that one was good, wasn't it?
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's go Bulldogs.
Not like us.
I think Mizzou ends up taking care of this one. We will certainly be talking about Xavier versus the Illini tomorrow. We'll be reacting
Bring
to
your
Mizzou
Illini gear.
versus Drake as well. We will be broadcasting tomorrow from Cybergs out in Maryland Heights,
Dorset.
right off of Dorset. So come on out tomorrow. If you can't make it today, come out tomorrow, say hello to us. We'll be watching all of the action tomorrow as well. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy these games that are taking place. Come on out, say hello. We're going to be sticking around, I think, for a little while. The Fast Lane will be broadcasting here until 6 o'clock, so you can come say hello to them as well. We are broadcasting live today at Helen Fitzgerald's. It's all brought to you by Bud Light. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy. Thanks to Doty for helping us out. He made everything possible on the technical side of things out here for us. Also thanks to Jordan Deacon, who's been back in the studio on the ones and twos for us back there, making things possible at home in the studios as well. For T-Bone and Alex, I'm BK. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fastlane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.